How are we doing today, people? It's your boy Veedu Vidz in the house, and today I'm with a very special guest, none other than Asadullah Ali. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, and hello to the world. I'm also in my house.
Do you want to do something a similar sort of greeting, like yo yo yo? It's your boy A. It's your boy Double A in the house.
I was more like Triple A or.
Oh yeah, Andalusia. Oh yes, Asadullah Ali of Andalusia.
I can guarantee that my backdrop is not present in some sort of cave in Afghanistan.
Yeah, listen, he is speaking from a unconfirmed location somewhere in the region from Morocco to Malaysia, and we can't confirm where. Yeah, exactly. But there you go. So thank you so much for being on, man, and thank you so much, guys, for tuning in as well. I appreciate that. Before we get into the conversation, please share this link with your friends, with your family, with your next door neighbor, with your cat, with your dog. Maybe they can learn something from this exchange, and let's get the word out there, and let's have a very sort of open and a friendly, funny, honest, whatever you want to call it, conversation. So Asad, for those people who may not be aware, you are a Muslim, a convert to Islam. And I would actually recommend checking out Asadullah's YouTube channel, because on his YouTube channel he's got a story, a video about his story, how he converted to Islam and that whole journey, his life as well. It basically a short biography, and I found it very, very interesting, very honest and open, raw, and I feel like I've got a better understanding of yourself. And I thought that video was great. I mean, if you can actually post the link to that in the chat, that would be great, so people can maybe refer to that later. But you're a convert to Islam, and I am someone who was born Muslim but left Islam. So we are having a friendly conversation without anyone getting hurt. So I would say that's a good start.
Because we're separated by computer screens. That's the only reason.
Oh yes, exactly. Separate. And by the way, this guy that I'm speaking to, he may look very friendly and cuddly, but he is a master in Taekwondo. So if anyone gets brave enough to challenge him, I would just say, at your own peril.
I'm old now, so that's probably not going to happen.
Oh, well, you what's the word? You mature with age. It's like old wine. The older you get, the better you get. So thanks so much. And can I ask, how did you first come across my channel, and then we can get onto the context video? But I mean, when you first saw my satire or some of the videos, what did you think? Like, this guy's crazy, what he's doing? Be as honest as you want.
It was like, you were funny and charming. I never had any issue with you or anything like that. There were people would show me your videos, and I would watch them, and sometimes I would laugh, and I'd think about what you were saying and things. And then one day somebody kind of came along and said, can you respond to this video? Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm posting that link, and they said, can you respond to this particular video? And I watched your video, and then that was it.
That was it. And how was the this is me asking as as someone who's a satirist, or as a creator, a small one with a small c, not the creator, but a small creator in a sense. How was the process of looking at a satirical video that is talking about your religion in a humorous way, in a critical way, and then you had to then make your own video, satirical, humor, and also addressing the points? How did you find that process for you?
Well, it was normal. I mean, I've done this forever. The thing is, not in terms of satire. I don't recall. Maybe I've done one satire video in the past, but I'm used to it. I've been in academia for several years. I'm used to people critiquing my views and vice versa. So it was not something that I wasn't not accustomed to, or anything, or that shocked me, or that I was uncomfortable with. I mean, I never had an issue with it. So
that's great. So okay, so guys, I see some questions in the comment section. I will get to your questions. Do not worry. As it is, give us some time to acquaint ourselves, and then I'll let you guys take over as you always do. So Asadullah, let's start with something which I think is absolutely necessary for people like me and you is that, you know, we both have gone opposite directions. I was born Muslim, I've gone the other way. You weren't Muslim, you become Muslim. And you know, there are the presence of ex-Muslims is much more visible on social media and whatnot. And just because, you know, I'm an ex-Muslim and I see another ex-Muslim, that doesn't necessarily mean I agree with them or that I agree with their perception of Islam or the way they talk about Islam or Muslims. So what would be your advice? And I think we need engagement from both sides. My channel, I really sort of value free speech and engagement, whether it's through comedy or these types of videos. What would be your advice to Muslims who maybe want to reach out to, what would be your advice to ex-Muslims who want to reach out to ex-Muslims? I'm getting so messed up now. What would be your advice to ex-Muslims who want to reach out to Muslims in the way they create their dialogue, in the way they speak to people? So, for example, we were talking about this earlier before. If you hear an ex-Muslim say, I'm just going to say it and then we can talk about it later. Is, oh, Muhammad was a pedophile. He slept with a 9-year-old. So how could you believe in someone like that? I mean, that's disgusting, bro. Like, what's wrong with you, man? Come on. Now, I know in their mind, they think that's an amazing argument, but it doesn't come across like that always. So what would be your advice to those people in how to engage?
Well, you know, I'm not one to tone, you know, police tone. I don't like doing that. However, I will say that if you're going to approach somebody with such a trite attitude or with such trite responses, don't expect them to think that you want a serious conversation. You know, I've had a lot of people, for instance, come up to me, or online at least, and attempt to debate, quote unquote, or have a discussion with me. And, you know, that's one of the first things that comes out of their mouth. And they expect me to respond to them, you know, with some sort of sophisticated form of argument or something, or just have a normal talk with them. And it's like, I know what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, for me, I can tell that you are not really interested in a real discussion here. And it's not that I'm so much offended by what they're saying. I'm offended by the fact that they assume they can come in there and talk to me and then expect me not to respond in kind. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing that I don't really understand with a lot of people, especially not all ex-Muslims, but a lot of them who kind of come into my chats or on my Facebook page and then say these like really rude and disgusting things, and then just want me to be like, oh, you know, okay, let's have a nice talk and just share some evidences and then have some tea. And it's like, I know what you're doing. You're not here to have a talk. You know, you're here to just make me angry. You know, that's one thing, is that if you want to have sort of respectful dialogue, then you should show respect. If you don't, you know, don't do it. That's fine. But don't expect the Muslims to respond nicely to those sort of remarks. So that's one thing. Secondly, I think the most important thing is that, and I think we already talked about this earlier, was that there is a huge problem in society in general, not just among ex-Muslims or Muslims, but in society in general, in what we call, quote unquote, the information age. You know, now that we have the internet, everyone has all this information on their hands, and it's sort of made everyone believe that somehow they're an expert on everything. And you know, and as somebody who's worked in academia for a long time now, and I'm talking about like 7-8 years, I've worked with policy institutes, think tanks across the world, primarily Malaysia, you know, counterterrorism studies. I've also done studies on the environment and policy reforms and things like this. I can tell you right now that one of the most annoying things that I come across in any discussion are a bunch of people who, no offense, you know, work some job, okay, and I'm not disrespecting anybody's position in life, you know, that has nothing to do with the subject that they're discussing. They look up something for 10 minutes on YouTube or Wikipedia or something, and then they want to be put on the same level as somebody who has worked in the field for 10 years, okay, who really knows what they're talking about. And there's this perception out there that somehow there's this democracy of knowledge. And that's really annoying, not only for academics, but when you're trying to have a serious, sophisticated discussion about something and you want to show evidence, and you have somebody on the other side of the panel, quote unquote, who wants to be taken seriously and on the same level as an expert who has done almost no research, this is a huge issue. And you see this all the time, especially with especially in debates about Islam. Like, oh, Islam is the reason for terrorism in the world today. And it's like, have you even bothered to read one empirical study on the psychological profiles of these terrorists? One? I'm just not even like a sentence these people have even ever read, because I can tell when they make these arguments they sat down one day, they read the Quran, and then all of a sudden they just want to go bomb people. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. It's not even close. You had some guest on your show earlier who keep sort of mentioning this myth that they study Islam, the more religious they get, and then all of a sudden they want to go kill people. And it's like, I can tell they've never even done 5 minutes of study, because the vast majority of researchers in counterterrorism studies and psychologists who have actually done case studies and profiles on these people would completely disagree with you. And I have so much evidence on hand right now. Before this discussion, I got 20 references on me just in the last year, showing that this opinion is nonsense.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I don't want to rant too much, because I know.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's very interesting. Sorry, I can hear myself.
And so, for instance, you got some guy in your chat who says Islamic scholars are apologists, not scholars. See, I'm not talking about Islamic scholars. I'm talking about secular scholars who have studied counterterrorism, who have studied psychology. I'm talking about atheists, Hindus, Christians, Jews, who actually did research. I'm not talking about some guy in Saudi Arabia who studied, Aqidah or something. I'm talking about people who have done research on the subject.
Right.
They think that you are talking nonsense.
I think I can hear myself in your.
Oh, really?
There's a bit of echo.
So, I have proof for it too. I could just post it right now, and half the people who are in your chat wouldn't even know what's going on, because they've never even bothered to research this stuff. They think all academic research is nonsense, or they think there's some sort of conspiracy to protect Islam from criticism, which is nonsense as well. Let me see if I put my headphones in. Will that help?
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's much better. Okay, so let's start with something small before we get into. You mentioned quite a lot of stuff, and you're more than welcome to share this on the chat if you want. No problem. All the work, the reports and whatnot. Let's start with, let's say, for example, an ex-Muslim, or even forget just a person, whether they're ex-Muslim or non-Muslim, whatever you want to call it. Let's say they hear, they do have a problem with the age of Aisha. Let's just use this as an example, or it could be something else, or multiple wives, or whatever. Take a pick. They have a problem with this issue. How would you want them to come and approach you? And they have, and they are concerned about this. They find this immoral or strange, or they think this is not a good model for society. If they come up to you, how would you want them to address this issue with someone like yourself or another Muslim to have a fruitful discussion?
Okay, well, first off, and I say this without trying to be rude, and I say this even to myself, when you ever go up to discuss with somebody these issues, like I said, this is advice for myself as well. One, know your place. And what I mean by that is know what you don't know, and try to figure out what the other person knows first before you try to jump into a discussion with them. Because, for example, if you're talking to some regular guy on a Facebook post or whatever, okay, that's fine. All right, some person who has equal amount of knowledge than you. But if you're going up against somebody who has studied the subject for a very long time, don't expect to go in there and quote unquote pwn them, because that's not how it's going to happen. All right, you're probably going to get humiliated. That's what's going to happen. And if your idea is to go in there and try to humiliate this person, or make their followers leave them, or try to even convince them, which is usually not the case, that's not going to work. Okay, so people come up to me all the time telling me about terrorism and stuff like this, or even Aisha's age, and I'm just reading this stuff and I'm thinking this is going to be so easy. You have no idea what you're saying to me right now. So that's one thing. Know your place. Secondly, if you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't have that much knowledge, humble yourself in the way that you speak. You know what I mean? Go in there and say, look, I read this hadith and it sounds really weird to me. Okay. And it doesn't sound right. Can you explain it to me? What is your explanation? Just do that. That's all you have to do is start a discussion. You don't have to go in there and be like, pedophile, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, like, what do you expect is going to happen after that? Seriously. Yeah. What do you expect is going to happen? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting point. So have a bit. So be more inquisitive rather than assertive.
Yeah, yeah, that's a better way of putting it. You know, don't go in there with a combative attitude unless you're looking for combat. Because
yeah, you know, I think you know what that could be extended to pretty much any discourse.
Yeah, exactly.
About anything serious. You know, if you like, you may have your hang-ups about Islam or any religion or politics or whatever you want to call it. And if you are a genuine truth seeker, then maybe the approach should be, well, tell me what your argument is. You know, formulate this in your own words and let me see how I respond, rather than me telling you what you think and then be like, look, how could you believe that, man? That's so ridiculous. You believe X, Y, and Z. How could you do that? And then you haven't even asked the person what they believe. You haven't even heard them out, and you've already made up your mind what they believe and how they're going to react to you.
Yeah, and you know, and I think a lot of the things it has to do with also is that, you know, social media provides a sort of cover where we don't have to be civil to each other, and I think that's also very problematic. You know, normally people don't behave this way in conversation unless they're looking for like confrontation. You know what I mean? Like people, I think that 90% of the people, like a lot of these ex-Muslims or even, you know, people who don't like Islam come on and say these things like pedophile and blah, blah, blah. I don't think in real life they would behave that way. I think that...
yeah, still going, sorry.
I think that generally, like if they went up to a Muslim, they would be more of the inquisitive type, you know, in a personal conversation, because they're engaging with an actual person and they can see people's reactions and things. And they don't, there's a sense in every human being that they don't really want to hurt people. You know what I mean? So they'll try.
No, I agree. I actually agree with that, because I think when you see someone in front of you, a real human being, and you see their body language, you see them physically, and you see them that they are a human and not something behind a screen, then you radically change the way you have a conversation with them about anything. Forget about religion, even simple things. You know, you completely change your attitude. And I think social media and the internet in general, I mean, this is again not even specific to Islam or religion, has radically changed the way we communicate. And it's just about, you know, if I type in with caps lock, that, you know, that must mean I'm so much more intense, or that, you know, I'm really serious about my views. Or if I attach a meme to what I say, then, you know, well, sorry, mate, you just got earned. Yeah. And of course, it's funny or it's silly and whatever. But obviously, if you want to have a serious discussion, of course, then we're having then if you want to have fun and poke fun and be like, nah, great. But if you want to have a serious discussion, and if you genuinely want to know the truth, whatever that is, then that is a different ball game. And I think that, like you were saying before, it's a different set of rules for that. So yeah, I mean, I would say that advice goes for everyone, Muslim, not Muslim, religion, politics, bloody the weather, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I agree. But you see, there's also a double standard here too, because I think that people generally adopt, for example, the whole thing that I mentioned about knowledge. So when you see, for example, a lot of atheists, and I'm sorry to pick on them a lot, but they
I feel very persecuted right now, sorry.
But you know, like when you see a lot of, like, or should I say militant atheists, quote unquote, you
yes, Goffin. Just say it. I can feel you want to say it. You're just holding back.
I'm trying. And then you know, they go after, like, say, young earth creationist, right? They will go through every academic peer-reviewed article they can find to destroy these people. Okay? But when it comes to their views on religion, all of a sudden, oh, academia, you know, these people are in their ivory towers. They don't know what they're talking about. You know, like, you know, they don't do any real research, things like this. You know, and it's like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You know, you have to have standards. And yes, certainly there are disagreements in academia. Not everyone is not perfect, right? There are going to be problems, but there's still an institutionalized standard within society that makes knowledge, you know, possible. You know, the university has its flaws, but we still need it. Like, you know, we have to use that discourse as a means, as a startup, as a jumping off point. Simply, you know, repeating, you know, these obscure opinions that you find online from some random website or YouTube video is not in any way, shape, or form respecting knowledge or respecting any sort of intellectual dialogue. And that,
You know what? Yeah, I agree. And you know what? This maybe what do you want to call it? How do I put this? As you know, you are an academic, so I suppose any academic, when they hear the common man talking about the subject, like for example, I don't know, if I was I don't know, you know, if my field was about, you know, the environment, or if I was a geologist or something like that, and I hear someone say, you know, global warming is X, or you know, it's like this, it's like, no, you stop.
Yeah,
you don't know.
The thing is, too, that you need to understand is like, okay, I am an academic in certain fields, but I'm also a common man in another field. But academia has taught me to shut my mouth when somebody else is speaking that is in a different field. Like, you know, that's the thing, is like, I have learned that because, not just because of what other people are doing outside and they're sort of butchering the research that I do, but I've also learned that because that's what academia teaches you, is like, you need to shut up when the other guy is talking. Like, you know, like,
Yeah.
like, you know, like, I'm not going to go and start preaching about, okay, for example, I have certain opinions about certain political views, okay, but I'm not going to go walk in to a political science course and start telling the professor how to do his job. Okay, that is beyond the pale of arrogance. Like, that is just like, that's something you don't do, you know. And but for some reason, people on the internet think it's okay.
Okay, so of course, people on the internet, I mean, it's like a, you know, just
like,
people in a cafe or people in a market just talk about whatever they want to talk
people
about.
on the internet, but
yeah. So okay, so that's an interesting point you made there. So now I think we're agreeing too much. People may think that we're not even, you know, that we're actually probably in the same room. So let me press you on that. You said that, you know, if you wouldn't go into a political science, you know, science lecture and say and tell the professor, you know, you've read it all wrong. You have no idea what you're talking about. It's like this or whatever. You would not do that. I would not do that, because, you know, we know that we are outclassed in knowledge and expertise and blah blah blah. So using that logic, one of the things that annoyed me when I was on this journey, when I was sort of on the verge from Islam to atheism or Islam to agnosticism, was when I saw Muslim scholars or imams or whoever you want to call it talking about science, like evolution didn't happen this way, or the earth is like this, and they haven't got any science background, they're not doctors, they're not medical doctors, you know, like this guy. They're not any, sorry, I just had to slip that in there. They're not, I appreciate that. They're not anyone with any speciality in science, yet and this is not only with Muslims, this is with Christians that do it. Everyone does this, okay? I'm not trying to have a go at Islam, but everyone, they sort of, like, if you, like, I'm not going to tell the Imam how to pray namaz or salah, fine, or the theology of his religion or the intricacies of fiqh, whatever. But at the same time, I don't expect that Imam, if he hasn't got a science background, to tell me that evolution is not real, because now you're encroaching upon the domain of science, if that makes sense. How would you feel about that?
I'm fine with that.
Well, I'm glad you are. Okay, guys, that's all we have time for. I'm joking. Yeah. Well,
no, I mean, like, if you want me to tell you why,
sure, go for it.
I mean, the whole thing about science in the Quran is a very recent invention in Islamic tradition. It just occurred within the last 2 centuries, actually, as a response to sort of colonial powers taking over and also the Western world in general, sort of growing in strength and power, and Muslims being pushed into the sort of this corner where now they feel this sense of insecurity, so now they have to sort of justify their religion through scientific and technological means. Prior to that, however, the majority of, actually all of the classical scholars completely didn't even read science in the Quran. Like, Al-Ghazali went the farthest in saying that the Quran mentions science in a very general way, like the principles of science, but like most Islamic scholars didn't even read any sort of scientific knowledge in the Quran itself. This is not apologetics. Like, you can read Imam Shatibi, for example, a famous Maliki jurist who was refuting this one minority group within Andalus at the time, who was saying, oh, you know, all of our recent scientific theories that we've been coming up with, like in astrology, like in astronomy and stuff like this, they're in the Quran. And he was like, the Sahaba and the Prophet himself, peace be upon him, never read the Quran that way, so why are you doing it? Like, that was basically his refutation. He was like, you're done, you know, why are we doing? And only until like Muslim modernists came along after the fall of or even prior to that a little bit, during like the Turkish reforms, when French positivism was becoming very popular and things like this. And even after that, they started saying, oh, no. Oh, the Quran says something about the Big Bang. And the Quran says something about embryology. And the Quran says this and the Quran says that. And it's just like, that just came out of nowhere, honestly.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I think what you were saying is very interesting. Talking about embryology, I can't remember who I was speaking to. Was it my father or some other? I think it's my friend who was a Muslim. This is, some time ago, and we were talking about embryology. And I said to them, "Do you really think the companions or the Prophet or even people 100 or 200 years after knew anything about embryology, or even read that verse in the way we may read it today and understand that it's attempting, or rightly or wrongly, I don't want to get into about that. Do you think they understood it like the way we understand it?" And of course, as far as I'm aware, it's a no. Or if it is, this is what I'm trying to say. When people start fishing for scientific proofs or evidences in the Quran, I mean, I was speaking to Dr. Osama Hassan, who I've got a lot of respect for. I think he's a fantastic guy and a fantastic learned man, Muslim, and he's an astrophysicist. And he was saying that Muslims, there was this time where, that story of Joseph, Yusuf alayhi salam, where he talked about his dream, and in his dream saw 12 moons or 12 planets, and 12 stars, where it was, something like that. And someone said, oh, that's proof for the 12 planets in our solar system, and that's proven by the Quran. So we were there before you guys. And then some years later, it was discovered that that wasn't a planet. It was like a moon or something in our solar system. And he said, you've now just falsified the Quran. So once you start attaching scientific miracles, from the Quran into the real world, and if they were later to be proven wrong, you've just falsified the Quran. And
No, yeah, that's problematic. Also, since science is continuously changing. But like, for example, let me give you some examples of classical interpretations, because some individuals also in your chat are making the statement that the Quran, sort of mocking the idea that the Quran is not speaking about scientific facts. So, for example, in several passages in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He laid the earth out flat. Okay. All classical mufassirun, including Ibn Abbas, who was one of the first major mufassir, okay, basically said that this verse is talking about Arab hospitality. And what they mean by that is that when the Arabs went out to the desert, okay, what they would do is, because there was rocky or hilly terrain, they would flatten out the earth below their feet before they put the rug down, okay, to make it comfortable for people to live. I mean, you can just look this up right now. You don't even have, you can go to the qtafsir.com, look up Ibn Kathir, and he'll mention it, even Ibn Abbas's opinion below that. Okay, none of them said, oh, the world is flat. That's not how they interpreted that passage. Likewise, with other scientific phenomenon in the Quran, everything the Quran says was basically common knowledge to the Arabs at the time, and it was being expressed in a way that tried to give them the impression of God's mercy and God's purpose for their existence. That was it. That's the only reason that they were even mentioned. Like, even the whole thing about the fresh water and the salt water, it's like, oh, look at that. See, God is doing this for you and things like that. It was all teleological. It had nothing to do with, oh, hey guys, quantum physics. Like, what would be the purpose of that? And here's another argument too. How would the Muslims, because by the way, the Golden Age did happen. All right, a lot of people try to deny it, but it did. About within 2 centuries after the Muslims conquered the surrounding regions, scientific advancement went, production went crazy, okay, skyrocketed. And the reason for this is because the Muslims back then didn't read science in the Quran. Because if they had read science in the Quran, then how would they have been able to have such an open mind about so many scientific theories? If they could just read in the Quran and be like, oh, it's there, we don't need to research anymore. They didn't do that.
That's a very interesting point you made there. You mentioned that thing about we have spread the earth flat like a carpet. I think that's the verse in the Quran. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was Dr. Osama Hassan again. He said that, I don't want to misquote, Imam Sayyuti, he said the earth, he used that verse to say the earth is flat, but there was another Muslim scientist who said no.
Imam Sayyuti. Well, Imam Sayyuti mentioned just the literal translation of words. You have to understand about Al-Jalalain tafsir is essentially a linguistic commentary. It has no mention, it has very few mentions of hadith or fiqh or how things should be the case. I mean, it's primarily about grammar. That's why it's considered a beginner's tafsir. A lot of people like to use it. But let's take that as an argument. Let's say that Imam Suyuti did mention that the earth is actually flat and that we don't live on this round sphere, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Many tafsirs prior to him said the opposite. Many more conservative scholars, like for instance Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah, they all mentioned that the earth was round, and they interpreted the Quran in the same fashion. They interpreted the Quran in the same fashion that I mentioned earlier. They never mentioned that, oh, this thing. So, I mean, if you want to use a later tafsir, okay, because this is a medieval tafsir that we're talking about, al-Jalalain, over the classical scholars, then I think that's going to be a little bit of a problem. Because it's sort of like saying, well, how do I put this? Generally, when we're doing like historical surveys, or we're trying to examine what the actual interpretation is in accordance with like the first generation of Muslims, we're going to go to the earliest source material. We're not going to go to the later source material. That's like me saying, oh, let's use the 19th and 20th century tafsir that mentioned scientific miracles to interpret what the Muslims back then believed. Like that's not fair. You know
so then, I mean, in that case, there's just two points. Would you categorically say, because what you're saying is very interesting, actually, I must say, would you categorically say imams or sheikhs, scholars, whoever they may be, who do not have a science background, or even if they do have a science background, should not be in the business of trying to derive any scientific miracles, claims from the Quran or the Hadiths?
Yes, I think it's wrong for anyone with I think it's wrong in general, even if you have a science background, to interpret science in the Quran. I think that's just wrong.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's a very fair statement. And the second thing is, if what you're saying, that the classical tafsirs are more accurate and closer to the actual Prophet and the Sahabas and whatnot, the companions, is there any point in writing new tafsirs after like 200 years? Because it's just getting more and more further away from the actual source. What's the point of? So, for example, if someone today said, I want to write a tafsir, you'd be like, well, what's the point? We've already got some.
It depends on what the intention of the tafsir is. So, for example, if you're trying to write about like contemporary events, like if you're doing it from like a fiqh perspective, right? Because fiqh is constantly evolving, right? Then that would be okay, because like you're trying to bring in like, how does this earlier ruling, apply to today? Things like that. Like that's okay. If you're trying to do like a linguistic commentary that hasn't been translated yet or something, that makes sense. But like basically trying to include things in there that the classical scholars themselves did not originally intend, that makes no sense. That to me, that's completely wrong. And I'm not the only one saying this. It's not apologetics. I mean, like I said, classical scholars both all oppose this sort of interpretive method, and even many contemporary scholars today are saying this is wrong. I mean, this is not how you should be doing it. Now, it's caught on for a large amount of people for, I think, many reasons that I expressed earlier, especially with the whole internet culture. But it's not considered a sound way of looking at it.
So let me ask you: you said that you would not favor any scholar or imam or whoever it may be trying to derive some sort of, I don't know, scientific miracles or claims from the Quran. Would you? I mean, so what is your sort of position on like things like evolution, Adam and Eve? Do you look at this as a conflict, or do you just leave it?
I have no problem with it. To be honest, I have no problem with evolution. Generally speaking, although to be honest with you, I think that the whole conception of like I also have a problem with common ancestry, but what I have a problem with is, here's where I guess you could say there's a conflict, right?
Sorry, go on.
So I think it's a conflict, but so Allah says that He made Adam and Eve. Okay, now we don't know the exact process of how that occurred or anything like that, but I do believe that there were actually two special individuals who created. Now, I don't know how that necessarily fits in or contradicts the evolutionary theory. I don't think it does, because from my understanding of evolutionary theory, it's not that absolutist with it when it comes to, it doesn't sit there and deny that Adam and Eve could have possibly existed or not. So I don't really see how there's a conflict there. I mean, that's about as far as it would go in terms of conflict if you were to even think about it that way, for me personally. But like, I follow evolutionary theory. I have no problem with it. I think it's also very helpful in terms of understanding human development over time. Like even, for example, even with the Aisha issue, and that was brought up earlier, for me, I use evolutionary theory with respect to that in explaining sort of our biological and social conditions and how that would have been morally acceptable back then, et cetera, et cetera. So personally, I don't really see an issue with it. And it's not even a matter of cognitive dissonance. It doesn't bother me at all.
Okay, so fair enough. So let me play the role of a Muslim who would have a problem with it,
Yeah.
and say to you, Ya Ali, Ya, sorry,
Well, thank you.
Ya Ali, how could you say something like that, brother? If Adam and Eve is mentioned in the Quran that Allah created Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
He created Adam from clay, and he created Eve out of his rib. Although that's not in the Quran, I think that's in Hadith or something like that. Nevertheless, Allah mentioned that He fashioned them with His hands. He actually created them, and you're telling me that a biological or natural process of evolution, which is basically from some one-celled organism to a fish to a monkey to a human being. That's how so you're saying that Adam's father or great ancestor is a monkey. How could you possibly say that?
Well, first off, that's not even an appropriate understanding of evolution.
I know.
It's like, what does that even mean? Like, even in the current standard evolutionary story is that we're cousins to apes. And
yeah, of course. I know it's not like exactly. But I'm just giving you a thing. So if they were to say, listen, man, why?
Well, I would say that Allah made a special creation. It's not. It doesn't have to destroy evolutionary theory or evolution. It doesn't oppose it. I mean, if you believe in God, it's not like it's difficult to believe that would happen. It's like, relax.
So I mean. So the point I'm trying to say is that when they look at the Quran and they look at the stories within the Quran, the verses, and they say, God did X, He created Adam, then this happened, and you're saying there's no problem with evolution. I don't know if you're aware. Some years ago, there was this conference in London. Have Muslims misunderstood evolution? I'm not sure if you're aware of that. Anyway, I was there, and Yasser Qadhi was there. Osama Hassan was there. It was actually hosted by Adam Dean. And
Adam.
Yeah. So what do you want to call it? Dr. Osama Hassan said that he had so many Muslims come up to him and say, I think I'm losing my faith because when I'm in science class or when I'm doing my work in the lab, I know evolution is true. But when I go to the mosque, they're telling me it's not. They're telling me creationism and Adam and Eve and God and this whole story. And a lot of people, Muslims, were in that. And actually, I was as well, to be completely honest with you, in that I don't know who to believe anymore. I don't know who to look at. So I would encourage you and people like yourself to speak to these imams or sheikhs, whatever it is, who are pushing nope, evolution is not real, it's creationism. Push against that narrative,
Oh yeah, no, we do. To be honest, like I bring it up all the time. I was critiquing, no offense to Brother Hamza, but I was critiquing Brother Hamza Swords' arguments way before he even recanted them. I was sending him even personal messages telling him, look, this is wrong. Like, wow. I'm not trying to put myself above him, but I'm just telling you, like, people were going out of their way. There's a reason he recanted.
And you played a hand in that.
Well, I think so. I hope so.
Wow. See, that is not I've got to respect that because, he was someone who was pushing the whole science miracles quite a lot in the early days. And when he said, when he took back his position and said, no, we can't do that, we can't take scientific miracles from the Quran, everyone was like, what? You've just been pushing this for the last 5-10 years, and I'm telling me. Nevertheless, people can change their mind. So I at least respect him for his changing position. And if you had a hand to play in that, then you have you are the puppeteer, you are the man behind the scenes.
I'm just one of the people that might have talked to him, but the thing is that one of the ways that we address this, as I mentioned, first off, is we have to bring Muslims back to the sort of traditional classical perspective on a lot of things. Like I said, the whole issue with science in the Quran is a recent invention. A lot of Muslims don't know this, and once you show them the evidences from the past, from other scholars like Imam Shatibi and others who oppose this even thinking about it, like they will start to change their minds, and there, a lot of should I say ex-Muslims and even just people who are against Islam in general have been using this as some sort of like, beating stick against Islam. Like, oh, see, Islam is so ridiculous because it mentions this and this in the scientific. It's like, you do realize that that's just a recent perspective. Like, you're only attacking what could only be considered sort of a heretical viewpoint of the Quran itself. No offense. I mean, but you're only helping Muslims to go back to a more traditional understanding of their faith. So when you see some of these, I see some like, I forget who they are. Anyway, some online polemicist always like attacking the scientific miracles. I'm like, okay, have at it. I don't care. Like, like who cares what you, like, it's not like you're going to be changing anything radically about how Islam is understood. When you get people to reject that, if you're thinking that you're going to get people to reject Islam in general, then all it means is that the people who are rejecting Islam don't know their tradition. That's really it. No offense. I mean, if that's your intention, Well,
I mean, that's a very interesting point, because you're saying, I mean, I'm going to take your position to be true, because otherwise, for the sake of the argument, if the real Islam is classical Islam, whatever that means, or however you want to interpret, or however you want to define that, people that are born in a period where classical Islam is not maybe the mainstream narrative or the main thing taught in mosques and schools and whatever it is, and if they reject a non-classical version of Islam, on some level, I mean, it's not their fault entirely, because not everyone has the resources or the time to do as much research or have the ability to do that. So they're like, yeah, I'm not really sure, man. Evolution is this, and you're telling me it's not. So you know what? If I've got to make up my mind, I'd rather go with science rather than religion or whatever it is. So I mean, how many? And this is what I have not a problem with Islam, but a problem in general with regards to religion is which version of Islam, or which version of Christianity, or whatever you want to call it, but for the sake of argument, Islam, which version of Islam are we talking about here? Because I can guarantee you, this with the same authority, or sort of not authority in a sort of arrogant way, but in a sort of yaqeen way, with the same certainty with which you speak, you've done your research and you come to these conclusions, you will have people with that same certainty talking about a Sufi version or a Shia version or a this, that, X, Y, and Z version, Salafi, ISIS, whatever you want to call it. And you can say, oh, they're wrong and whatever it is. And I might even agree with you. They may be wrong if you were to look at the sources. But that's the point. So if I'm rejecting one version of Islam because that was the version that was given to me, or that was the most dominant version around me, or, I mean, this is it. Can the real Muslims please stand up? It's that song, by Eminem.
Well, I think the question has a lot of implications in there. I mean, for one, I guess you're asking, can you blame these people for leaving something that they don't? That's the only modality that they understand, right? Like, and I don't think you can. And I think that's one of the other issues with. That's one of the issues with contemporary apostasy laws, is that there are a lot of Muslims out there who have been fed a sort of modernist understanding of the religion, and for all intents and purposes haven't even been raised religious. I mean, for example, you look at a lot of Muslim majority countries today, like Bangladesh, and like you think, oh, these people are like practicing mullahs, and it's like, no, half of them are more Western than Westerners. It's like, and then when they leave, they have no idea what they left. They're leaving because they don't like some of the practices, the cultural elements that are involved in there. They haven't even done any research. They don't like it. They just don't like what they're dealing with, and they leave it. Can you really blame them? Is it fair? And I don't think it is. I don't think it's fair to blame them for something like that, for something they don't have very little understanding. They have something very little understanding of,
Yeah.
And I think that that's one reason why contemporary apostasy laws are problematic in a practical sense. Sorry, one more implication you made was that in regards to certainty. I don't think certainty from either side makes their arguments valid. Like, yeah, I'm certain, somebody else is certain, you're certain, I'm certain, but who cares? Regardless of ours, I mean, obviously we're certain, that's why we're disagreeing with each other. But that doesn't make one position valid over another. What we have to do is we have to take an honest appraisal of our own views, examine what is the most coherent and rational position to take for that particular belief that we claim to be following. that's really how it should be done. And I'm not saying it's easy, but it's certainly not. The differences of opinion are certainly not an indication that there isn't a right way to understand something.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair point. So let's talk about. I mean, we were speaking about science and sort of evidence, proof, academia. So how this is one of the things that I really struggle with. How do I know the Quran is from God? I mean, firstly, number one premise, there is a God. Second premise, which for me is a harder premise. The God part for me was still hard, but the harder one is God spoke to man, and this is what he said. Mm-hmm. Of course, over a period of 20 years and blah, blah, blah. Nevertheless, God spoke to man, and these were God's words. How does one establish that beyond any doubt, or with the with the least possible doubt, physically possible?
With regard to what exactly? Like that there's a God?
That the Quran, is the word of God, and firstly there is a God, but let's look at that. Let's assume there is a God. But for me, just because there is a God, there's no evidence or rationality that he even wants to speak to us. And if he did speak to us, that he spoke to us in this way. That's for me is a very big claim. How do you understand that? That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, how do you recognize? Well, why do you recognize there's a God, and why do you assume that he doesn't want to interact with humans?
I can't assume either way.
Oh, okay. So, and why would you assume that it's irrational that he would?
I'm agnostic. I don't know. I don't know if you would. I don't know if you wouldn't. I think if the assertion, that's why I would classify myself as agnostic. I cannot say there is a rational reason for God to speak to humans, or there isn't a rational reason. I don't know, genuinely.
So you're agnostic you're agnostic about theism, but not deism.
I'm agnostic about.
What I mean is, like, you're okay with God existing, but you're agnostic in respects to if he interacts with the world or not.
I'm agnostic about whether I'm agnostic now, because I'm kind of confused.
Okay.
I think I've tied myself up in a circle. So I'm saying for the sake of argument, let's assume there is a God. That's a given. Okay. Even then, if I were to assume that, there is no, for me, like, how do you get from someone who created a universe to he is now speaking to this tiny species on this planet? That's in this vast universe. That's a big jump for me. And how do you know that the Quran is the word of God? That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, it kind of asked another question prior to that: is why would he create such a tiny thing in this vast universe if he's not going to talk to them?
Does he talk to plants or animals, or I don't know. I mean, this is what I'm saying to you. The why is a very good question, but I don't have an answer for that. But I think human beings, again, this is sort of the ego of the human, that we are the center of the universe, and God created us, and he's speaking to me, and he's speaking to us, and this is his message to me and us, because he wants us to live in this way, because he's going to take us to heaven or hell. Many assumptions, and a lot of them are because human beings are so special. On some level, we are special, but not that special when you look at the magnitude of the universe. So for me, that's a big jump, personally speaking. And I when I thought about it, I thought, I don't have a rational or empirical. There's no proof in the evidence or in the rocks or in the atom to say that God did this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that
I didn't mean to
I have to listen to what you're saying. One of the things that I've always found fascinating about, I hear this a lot. Humans have this big ego and we want to be special and blah blah blah. I was like, I never thought that humans collectively thought that way about themselves. I've always thought that humans had a tendency to believe these things more because, first off, it was sort of natural to do so, and secondly, because we're communicative creatures, and we are creatures that need to communicate and need to understand the world through personal intention and purpose. And that was just sort of like, that's why it's just rational to believe that that's partly why it's rational to believe why God would want to communicate back. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't because, we're these special things in the middle of everywhere, in the middle of nowhere. And, it's like, I never thought it had to do with ego so much as it had to do just with the way people are. as humans. It's like, if you're deserted on a desert island, one of the things that you crave more than anything that really solidifies your sanity is human interaction. You saw the movie Castaway, I presume.
Yeah, great movie.
It's like, eventually he had to talk to it's not a true story, but he had to talk to a volleyball. But the reason they showed that was to represent that need, that essential human need for the condition of mankind to have communication, even with the universe. So I don't think it has anything to do with ego. I think it has to do with necessity. Like,
that's a very interesting point, actually. I think that's a very fair point, actually. I think so it's this need, like if you're, in the middle of a desert, or you're stranded in an island, or you're, plunged into a deep river and you're about to sink and die, and you're sort of like, come on, something out there.
The mind just does not. It force human beings do not voluntarily look at the world and seek something that isn't there. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, they don't. People have this idea about God where, like, people just like try to imagine that, like, they force themselves to imagine that there's like this creature out there or something that's going to come save them. As like they're forcing themselves to have a coping mechanism. Well, I don't think that's how it works. I think the human mind just automatically creates that. You know what I mean? Like, it's there. That's just the mind's natural tendency.
So I mean, that's a very interesting point. You said that we have this need, or this sort of this thirst for communication, because I think we are the most evolved species that on this earth anyway, that in terms of communication, that's what separates us from any other animal, I suppose, is the way that we can communicate in. So do you think that this is just an extension of that, and we've projected that onto God, we've created a God or prophets or whatever you want to call it?
Well, let's assume that yes, there, because I take a very different approach from, I think, a lot of modernist Muslims in terms of how to rationalize belief in God. So for me, that natural tendency pointing towards that existence, even if you want to call it a projection, is in and of itself sort of a rational default. Because it's something that's involuntary, it's something that we can't really help control, and it's something that it gives us a starting point. Now, I've offered other arguments, after that, because when you come from a rational starting point, it doesn't necessitate that the thing itself actually exists, right? But it gives us sort of a reason to do so. And so my argument in response to sort of it being a projection is that, well, you're talking about something that is way beyond the limitations of the natural world, something that we can't just examine and then infer that it's there, right? You've said it yourself. Like, you don't look at a rock and then all of a sudden, like, God, like, it doesn't just pop into your mind, right? So my argument in response to that would be, well, if there is nothing in the world that is pointing towards God as any sort of explicit indication, then how are we conceptualizing that the possibility of such an entity in such a limited reference?
That's an interesting question, and I genuinely don't mean to sound facetious or anything like that. But I mean, for centuries and millennia, we believed in, I don't know, witches or the boogeyman or some sort of other creatures, and mythological creatures and so on and so forth. And of course, one could say that those were we filled those spaces of mystery with what we could do best. We filled those mystery spaces that we couldn't explain with science or reason or rationality, and we said, well, this kind of creature must be doing it, or this kind of person must be doing this sort of function, But when it rains, it must be because someone is angry in the sky or whatever it is.
Well, what's fascinating about your objection there, and I always found very fascinating about this general objection about Santa Claus and spaghetti monsters and fairies and unicorns, is that they're all composites of the natural world. A flying spaghetti monster is something that flies in spaghetti. It's something that you can empirically verify. Unicorns are horns with horses on their head. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, let me reverse that. Unicorns are horses with horns on their head, something that you can empirically verify and combine. You're talking about Santa Claus. For people bring up Santa Claus, fat guy in a red suit delivering presents. How is that not empirically verifiable? These are things that people can imagine because they've already experienced them, and then just combine them into these little things, and they use them as a reference point, right? God is that's a completely more complex and different matter that you can't just, I can't look at my phone and then take this book and put it together and be like, oh, there's God, like it doesn't work that way. So I feel that objection, I know you weren't being facetious, but I do feel that objection misses the entire point. And I feel that it's not an accurate representation of how theists come to believe things either. And I think that's one of the reasons we have a problem communicating with each other, atheists and theists in general, is because atheists tend to have this very crude representation of what's going on in the psyche of theists, and also that existential experience. And I think theists have a hard time defining what that is. Now, I to be honest with you, I don't want to get into this huge philosophical discussion, and because I want to get to other things. But I want to say that I feel that is not an accurate representation of how theists believe or why they believe.
That's a fair point, and of course, I appreciate everything you're saying and the openness with which you're saying it. Because one of the things that when I was Muslim, I was like, even if I don't get Islam, like I might not be able to understand the correct version of Islam or whatever it is, but for me, I had a very hard time saying, how can there not be a God? How on earth has this all come into existence? If you were to go back in time, rewind the tape of the universe, there has to be some point where something pushed the first domino. And I would say that was God. Now, before we get to define God, God is loving, forget all of that loving, merciful, forget all of that nonsense, because that is nonsense for the time being. But just as a creator, I couldn't perceive there a universe without a God. So I think so. I mean, it's the same way. If I woke, I don't know, this is bad argument.
No, it's not a bad example. I'm trying to help. I want to help you kind of also, communicate that thought.
Yeah.
Because, look, there's nothing wrong with that view because it's a natural tendency, and it's the same natural tendency that you have to view that there's morality, or that there's purpose in life. Those things are not scientifically verifiable, and yet we believe them rationally. It's the same tendency that you have to see intrinsic value in other human beings.
Mm.
There's that's what makes it rational, is that it's part of the human condition. People might say, well, natural things don't prove the validity of certain things. And that's true. They don't prove the existence. The actual thing is there. Okay. But it gives us a rational story, because what are you going to do? You're a human being. It's not like you can be anything else. It's not like you can control the tendencies. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where I'm coming from here, and I'm trying to break this down to as simple terms as possible, is that this natural inclinations are how humans operate in the world. Most of the social structures that we have, human rights, political structures, these are all subjectively derived experiences that we place some sort of reality in, because we have no other choice but to do so. Everything that you think is moral has no scientific verification. There is absolutely zero tangibility to what you think is wrong or right about somebody's actions.
I would disagree with that, because let's say, for example, I don't know, let's say, for example, you, I don't, okay, forget you. Let's say, for example, sorry? Let's say, for example, someone beats their child.
Uh-huh.
And, there have been many tests, many research, whatever you want to call it, reports saying that if you beat your children when they're young, it produces certain chemicals in their brain, and we can measure this, and they usually have very negative effects when they're older, so on and so forth. Now, I haven't had to refer to God or any book. I'm just looking at the data. Okay. So I can say, using science, that it's bad to hit your children. And I'm sure there are many other experiments or whatever, research saying it's bad to hit people unprovoked, whatever, because it's for various reasons, because it produces this and that, and the person has a negative impact on their development. So we can make these statements without having to lean on any claim about supernatural God or creator or prophet or anything like that. So
Okay.
what would you say to that? And there are many other examples of,
Well, first, I think that's a little bit of a straw man, because I mentioned that there's a natural tendency to feel sort of revulsion or some sort of desire to.
I meant the last part where you said that.
So
maybe I misunderstood it about the last part saying.
No. What I'm trying to say is that these are sort of subjectively derived from human condition. Okay, so for example, when I see somebody getting unjustly treated, right, that there's a natural inclination in my mind that that's something wrong. Okay, there's something wrong with that, right? And it's not science telling me that. Like, you can read all these reports and say, oh yeah, it's bad for the development, but what do you mean bad for their development? That's sort of assumed. Like, what bad is, you know what I mean? So let me give you an example of somebody who's not normative in society, somebody who has a problem that we can consider, that I think we can all agree on as a human civilization has an issue. Okay, a psychopath, for example. Somebody who has zero empathy for his victims, who thinks it's a game to hunt and kill people. Like, that those inclinations don't arrive in their mind. Even if you told them, you gave them a scientific, oh, look, see, it says it's bad for their development. Do you think they're going to care? Like, what?
They may not care, but what I'm trying to say is, when you say natural thingy, so even if me and you think something is natural, it's just mine and your perception. It could be not just because we think it's natural. That doesn't mean it's true. So when I say look at the data, we're verifying whether or not it's true or not.
You're verifying what you've already feel compelled to believe in.
No, I mean, for the vast majority of human history, and even now, people think it's okay to beat their children.
Yeah.
But the evidence would say otherwise. It's bad for their development in terms of maybe shorter lifespans. They're more violent when they grow up. They have less empathy. All these different things, which I don't want to make it about being.
Okay, so the reason they believe that it's okay to hit their children, for example,
because it's natural, because it's the hierarchy, for example.
Well, no, they're thinking that, for example, this is sort of disciplinary action, and this is going to help them in their development. They're not doing it because they think, oh, it's bad for their. I like doing this because it hurts my child. Do you see what I'm saying?
I mean, I was hit by my parents. I'm their parents, so on and so forth. And they were saying, I'm doing it because it's good for you. So in their mind, this is a natural thing. If someone steps out of line, the correct response is you hit them. Now, the evidence says something else.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what I'm trying to say is that is that science can inform us of the details and sort of the direction we should go. But how we infer what is unjust and what is wrong is sort of an automatic thing. It's not something that we ration. It's not like we actually think about it for is murder wrong? And then we sit there, we're undecided about the issue. You know what I mean? Until we've had this long, complicated discussion in our mind that there's something really wrong about it. We tend to make those arguments post hoc. You know what I mean? Like, oh, here's the reason why it's wrong because I already feel this way. That's what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? The details.
That's fair enough. Yeah, that's fair enough.
The details tend to be where the confusions come in, like the context of the injustice that's being performed or of this justice that's being performed. The less data you have, for example, the less informed you're going to be about whether this thing really is just or not just. Right.
Yeah. But let's say, for example, we were, so like you said, that we, is it post hoc, that we then justify murder is wrong. We give the reasons why it's wrong as opposed to working out in the first place why it's wrong.
Yeah.
But let's say we were able to say why murder is wrong. Would that law to say murder is not wrong become even more powerful, even more sort of?
Of course, that's why we rationalize things to begin with, because we want an explanation.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the reason why. I mean, yeah, of course, it puts more force to it, but it doesn't. But if we don't, for example, have this complex argument as to why murder is wrong, it doesn't all of a sudden mean that our natural inclination to believe that injustice is bad suddenly becomes irrational, or suddenly becomes undermined as a result of that. You see what I'm trying to say? Like that, the human society would not function if we had to continuously try to justify a lot of these inclinations.
Yeah,
like that's what I'm trying. You see, I'm giving a more pragmatic understanding. Like I'm a pragmatist my philosophical quote unquote profession or field, whatever you want to call me. But so this is something that even the Islamic tradition kind of holds on to, is this belief in the fitra, which is sort of this natural inclination to believe in God and morality and goodness and things like this. Of course, the details is where things usually get muddled, or we have to have more details to understand things. But generally, this belief, like belief in God, is considered in almost in the same category as goodness itself, or belief that something is wrong, or things like this. So that's where the natural standard comes in, as sort of a jumping off point. And what I feel that atheists do, quite wrongly in many ways, is that they are always asking for verification of that natural inclination, but not of the other ones that they have.
Give me an example, sorry.
So for example, like human rights, like there is no such thing as human rights from a subjective, purely naturalistic standpoint. They just don't exist. They're not there. You don't have, there's no real value, like some transcendental value that we have to respect about each other. It just doesn't exist. So I mean, we operate in that way, because if we don't, we're just going to completely wipe each other out.
I think what you just said. I think what you just said there, actually, for me, is the strongest. Not evidence, but the strongest reason to have human rights, because we would, I think, on some level, wipe each other out. So, for example, if we were to look at the best or the most the most productive societies where the human beings flourished, they would usually consist of some sort of rights on some level, individual rights. People can say what they want as long as they're not inciting to violence. You shouldn't be able to just go into someone's house, steal their property, sleep with their wife, kill someone. So if you were to sort of look at history and take the best of all these societies, you'd probably come up, I'm guessing, on some level, come up with something pretty close to human rights. So in the very long experiment of human existence, we could say that these rights probably, they may not be perfect. Fine, nothing is perfect, I would say, but they probably are the best shot, the best chance we have in living in a peaceful world, or at least the most peaceful world we can possibly have if we were to follow these rules. But they're based on looking back at our history and saying what's the best, as opposed to God said X, therefore.
That's where I disagree. See, the thing is, I think that a lot of the whole survivalist mentality is sort of a post hoc rationalization. And I also feel that I think the past is unfairly depicted a lot of times, especially obviously in the contemporary period. We have this mythological view of ourselves that we are somehow so much more superior morally than the past, and I think that's a huge issue that needs to be dealt with. And I'm dealing with it in my next paper for Yaqeen Institute, actually. And what I mean by this is that people have this very anachronistic view of history, where they try to depict the past as having the same conditions as we do today. And then we apply our moral standards to them back then without realizing what those conditions may or may not have been. So what I mean by this, for example, is that we look at like past societies and how they operated, okay? And we'll look at this one rule and be like, oh my God, this is so unjust. Like, why would they do this? Without actually realizing the reasons behind they do it, and what the conditions were around those rulings. Like, were they trying to optimize? Or maybe they were trying to optimize the best possible solution for what they had, which was almost nothing, you know what I mean, in comparison to today. Like, were they trying to, and I'm not trying to say that this somehow makes everything that people did in the past necessarily correct, but what I am trying to say is that I think we unfairly judge past societies as being these immorally monstrous, civilizations that had absolutely nothing to give or any sort of wisdom whatsoever. They're all just a bunch of idiot brutes who had no idea what it means to live a good life. And it's like, I don't think that was the case. I think that's a horrible misrepresentation of how people live. Because if that was really the case, how the hell did we get here?
Yeah, I mean, we would have been finished before we even started. So you mentioned something about the past and certain rules or laws about the past which may have made sense back then. So I'm a satirist. I like making comedy videos. I believe in free speech. Do you think Islam, according to the classical scholars, the ones that you accept, promotes free speech, or do you think it is compatible with free speech, with comedy, with mockery, with ridicule? I mean, these are things which I, take very seriously. That's not to say I always ridicule everyone I meet or anything like that, but I do believe it should be used or that it can be used as a tool to highlight illogical things, I mean, or silly things, or even dangerous things. You know, if you've got a leader that's saying dangerous things, then you can write an academic paper or an article, or you can do a 5-minute sketch. So I really think, you know, what is your, according to the classical scholars, is Islam compatible with free speech? And obviously that then goes on to freedom of religion. So if someone really leaves Islam, should there be any punishment?
So you want to move from speech to...
Well, I mean, I think speech, in the sense, I should be able to express my own views. So if I want to express my leaving a religion or joining a religion, should I be punished? And we are both people who have changed our minds.
I think that there is obviously free speech within. There are principles of free speech within Islamic discourse throughout time. There have never been really rules on speech per se. There have been limitations to what one can or cannot say in the context of the Islamic civilization or Islamic society. So, for example, there was no, I mean, like you couldn't, as a Muslim, mock, or as a citizen of the Islamic polity, mock the religion or mock the Prophet's character.
Why? Because my first question is why.
Because it's already assumed that there was these are perfect standards, and that was the foundation of the society in which they were living. So you could mock, for instance, the leaders of the country. Like, they didn't care about that usually. Well, no, actually, some caliphs did. They tended to utilize religious doctrines in order to make themselves out to be infallible too in certain cases, and then of course they would go kill their opposition. But that's been happening forever anyway. So generally, you know, like political leaders and stuff were open for debate, and they allowed debates between different religions, you know, even so Christians and Jews could debate with Muslims and things like this. But generally, insult, or what constituted as sort of crude accusations, were documented under, and I'm trying to use contemporary language here because that's not how they would call it, but would basically documented under what we call libel and slander today. So that's
libel and slander is not the same as being mock. So if I say, if I were to make a joke about the Prophet, or that's not,
like, for example, if you said like the Prophet was this. Okay.
Let's say, for example, this is a silly, it's not even funny, but let's just say, for example, oh, the Prophet was really fat.
Okay.
Like, it's like a playground joke. Oh, you're really fat. Oh, you smell. Ha ha ha. If I said,
so what the scholars would do is that they would first off determine whether or not the statement was factual, or it was made in such a way that was meant to invoke some sort of like, basically they tried to examine the intentions of the person. Okay, that's how it was. So
if I say I was joking,
you were joking in what sense? They would ask.
I would say I was trying to make a joke.
I was trying to make a factual statement about the Prophet. I didn't mean to try to deride like his character or hurt or try to insult. That's how the classical scholars would look at it. As if there was no negative intention behind it, then there was no reason to be alarmed by it or anything. Like, so if you said, for instance, Aisha was playful, or something like this, or teased about how the Prophet teased her and things like this, nobody would care. But generally, when it came to, like, if you said something like the whole pedophile thing earlier, that would be taken very seriously, extremely seriously, because that's like, for them, the classical scholars in general, that's slander. That's just complete libel, even if you write it down. Like, that's just a horrible thing to say, and there's no factual basis behind it.
So you're saying, so if I said there are 10 moons, that's not a factual statement?
It's not a factual statement, but it's not slanderous.
But it's a lie?
It's a lie, yeah.
So why wouldn't I be punished for that? Or if I said the king has...
there's a difference between a lie and a slander. I mean, one is violating somebody's reputation. The other one is...
Okay, so reputation. So this is interesting, because reputation is the one thing that is about you that you don't own. You don't own your reputation. As in, let's say, for example, I think I'm an amazing guy. I think, you know what, I think, you know what, I'm so funny. I'm the funniest guy on the planet. But it doesn't matter what I think about what I think my reputation should be. It's up to other people to decide what they think of me. So I don't actually own my reputation in that sense.
But you have every right to protect your honor, or to have.
I can protect my honor, but I don't know about taking people to court if they say,
if somebody tells me I'm a terrorist, start getting like a bunch of like and my reputation has been ruined, and people think that I'm actually a terrorist. That's not cool. Like, I should have a right by the law to not only object to that, but to defend my honor. And that's not fair. Like,
I think there is a difference between mocking and slander. So if I accuse you of being if I accuse you, and you know what, Asadullah, I know he killed someone, like that's something different.
Horrible.
Well, I'm not saying you did. I'm not saying you didn't either. I'm joking. But if I say, I think Asadullah, man, he is like, I don't know, he's really fat. I don't believe this. He's really fat. He's really ugly, and his breath stinks, and he's like really bad at taekwondo, right? I've completely ruined your quote unquote reputation. But if I say the same thing about the Prophet, like I should be punished.
Okay, so in the classic Islamic polity, basically, the essential understanding was that the Prophet and Allah were off limits, and the companions were off limits by sort of basically divine decree. That was it.
So my understanding would be, and this is, I remember when Charlie Hebdo happened, and I was Muslim.
Yep.
I was like, you know what? It became for me personally, such a useless. Oh, you can't say that about the Prophet. You can't. It's like, guys, let them say what they want. I believe in the Prophet, and my opinion of the Prophet is not going to, it's not going to change if someone draws a cartoon in France.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why can't Islam stand up to mockery and ridicule? I mean, it's a massive claim to make, not just Islam, but any religion or any major assertion, about anyone's life. This is the perfect way to live. Why can't you sustain criticism that is mockery or whatever you want to call it? Like, the Prophet is a fat. He's smelly. I mean, it's not true. I can't prove it. But if I would
I give two arguments to that. Well, first off, I think that Muslims these days, of course, should do so. I think that's the only. I mean, we have to. We have to take on every criticism, regardless of whether or not it's considered crude or not. Okay, that's the position I take as well. That's why I respond to every criticism, regardless of its crude nature or its lack of crudeness. I tackle all of them, you know what I mean? And I condemn anyone who tries to violate the rules of engagement by trying to harm people, for example, right?
With regards to slander, I mean, if someone has passed away,
well, hold on. So anyway, like when Charlie Hebdo happened, I condemned that. And the reason I did had not only to do with the fact of my own personal preferences, but also because we are living in a time where, so I don't know if you believe in I'm sure you do believe in social contracts. So these societies that were developed back in the past in Muslim societies had these rules already structured in their societies that everyone already agreed to, that you can't do this. Okay. And this was part of, it wasn't something that had to be imposed upon other societies around them. So, for example, the Byzantines were always busy slandering the Prophet every chance they got, but it's not like they were sending assassins into Byzantine Empire and like killing these people, okay, because it wasn't happening within their own polity. All right, so that's one thing. So the whole thing that happened with like Charlie Hebdo was completely outside the bounds of even what classical scholars I think would have allowed, okay, because there was nothing. I mean, that was just like these guys are in a completely different place in time, like. They're doing their own thing in their own country. This is their own opinions, and you just randomly come from like somewhere and just go in and start murdering these people. It's just like that there was no even agreement to begin with between what they could or could not say. Like, it was completely unjust from both a legal standpoint, Islamic legal standpoint, and even just within the context of what they were doing. So, I think that's the reason that majority of scholars and the majority of Muslims in the world condemned it. But if you want to talk about like absolute free speech, I mean, there's no such thing, even in any society. You live in the UK, for example. I'm sure you already know this. There's only one country in the world that has any sort of absolute free speech, except for libel and slander, and that's probably the United States, as far as I'm aware, though I could be an exceptionalist right now.
I mean, Sorry. Just one point. You said slander, but once someone is dead or passed away, you can't. It's irrelevant what you say. Like if I were to slander Napoleon or Caesar, or any other major leader of the past, it doesn't make it doesn't make a difference. So why is Muhammad different?
According to Islamic scriptures, like I said, he's the prophet of Allah. He's God's. I mean, right? There's an obvious divine difference there. I mean, if you want to talk just within Islamic hermeneutics, I mean, that's what it makes sense. I mean,
okay, I understand from an Islamic point.
That's what the point we're talking about.
Yeah, but I mean, from a practical point of view,
if you want to talk about practicality, if you want to talk outside Islam, like, I guess you could say this.
I mean, let's say, for example, you live in not you, but someone lives in an Islamic country or a Muslim majority country, whether it's something as Saudi Arabia or Malaysia or Pakistan, take your pick. It doesn't really matter. Should anyone be allowed to, like, for example, draw a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad, even if it's in a non-provocative way? When I was in Hyde Park, I even said to Muslims, if I draw Muhammad sitting on a park bench, no, you can't do that. I'm not even drawing a crude, racialized, vulgar, whatever.
I definitely think there should be a distinction between, some sort of innocuous presentation versus whatever, any sort of crude, obviously. And I think the classical scholars would have done so as well. There's a difference between, say, idolizing or making an idol of something versus making a direct insult of that particular figure. So even then, there would have been a demarcation. That said, I'm going to be frank with you. I think that any society that comes up with that rule has a right to it. That's just there. If everyone agrees,
any society that comes up with the rule of what? So what's the rule?
If they want to restrict a particular form of speech within their society, they have every right to do so.
I mean, that's kind of just arbitrary, isn't it? I mean, it's not really
arbitrary. I mean, the thing is that what constitutes, for example, so what constitutes as slander and libel or insult or mocking is also arbitrary, is it not?
Yeah, which is why the best solution
is you do not impose that rule upon everyone else, except upon who it is agreed upon within their own societal structure.
No, the best solution is to not have that rule in the first place, because what defines what is offensive? I don't actually believe this, but I don't know. But someone might read the Quran and say, I find this verse talking about gay people or Jews or whatever it is very offensive. Now you can say, but you haven't read the context, you haven't read the, and they say, well, I'm sorry, this is how I understand it. So I could draw a cartoon to Prophet, and you might find it offensive, or someone out there might find it offensive, and I can say, but you don't understand my content. I'm a satirist. It's my job to make fun of people. And he goes, no, this is offensive. Now that's subjective. What is offensive? So if you're going to base a rule on something which is blatantly subjective, I mean, of course, there's a level of subjectivity in most laws or whatever. I get that. Why is the age of consent to sex 16 and not 17 or whatever? I understand that. But something as simple as taking offense, which is, even three brothers in the same family will not get offended at the same thing.
Okay.
And you're going to make that into a law, and then you're going to attach a punishment for that law, which is a very severe thing. It's one thing to say maybe you shouldn't do it. It's another thing to say if you do it, that is a punishment. And unfortunately, of course, I'm not saying Pakistan is the role model Islamic country by any stretch, but in countries like Pakistan and others like it, blasphemy is very serious, and you can get into life and death situations for uttering the wrong word or saying something in the wrong way. I'm not even talking about making fun of Islam. I'm talking about people that have said things against a particular companion of the Prophet or the Prophet's wife, and that's blasphemous.
So the whole thing too about offense, I think we're not in agreement of what that means. Actually, offense is not simply, for example, my understanding of offense is not simply like something you feel bad about. You know what I mean? So, for example, when we're talking about offending the Prophet's honor, I'm not saying the Prophet's going to be like, oh, how dare you? Because he's dead. You know what I mean? Like, he's not going to feel bad. You know what I mean? I think it has more to do with sort of this understanding of reputation and honor that sort of supersedes any sort of feeling about it. It's sort of like, it is in many ways, I have a hard time separating the whole context of offense in this regard from like slander and libel. So like, it's hard for me to do that because to me it's not just, or even the Islamic interpretation is not just simply offending somebody and making them feel bad, because you can do that with anything. You don't even have to say anything to offend people.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Like you could just not do something and offend somebody. You know, like opening a door for women these days, some places, like that's offensive.
You're right.
Like,
it is.
It is. Like, so I think that it has more of a it's not so much like a what's the word? I'm trying to find out an appropriate word for this. It's not based on feelings so much as it is based on the content of the speech and who is it being directed to. So
I mean, do you think, let's say for example, if we were alive in the time of the Prophet and I mocked him, or someone
he wouldn't
mocked
do it. He probably would not have hurt you at all.
Sorry, he would not have what? Sorry,
he would have not harmed you in the slightest.
So if he's not going to harm me, why should his followers?
Yeah, I'm just explaining to you what's going on.
No, sorry, I don't mean to have a go at you, but
you're like, why is he doing that? Like, I'm just telling you what the classical opinions are.
No, but I think, I mean, this is something which I was very confused about as a Muslim as well, because you hear stories of the Prophet.
Before you go on too, I just want to mention that there's probably going to be this thing about like, well, he harmed poets and stuff like this. Well, it's like, yes, he did under certain circumstances. So for example, there would be people who would like literally go up to his face and like call him names, and he wouldn't do anything. And then there was this guy, there would be a bunch of people in some other tribe saying these horrible poetry about him, and then he would send like an assassin. And they're wondering like, okay, so what's the difference here? Why would he be offended here and not offended over here, right? And it's like, well, if you actually read the story, it wasn't just about them insulting him. It was about them like trying to get people to like go to war.
Oh yeah, inciting to violence is...
Yeah, so that was the reason why. So that's what I'm trying to... I want to make that very clear that people don't bring that up as some sort of objection. Like, oh, well, he was offended during this time. It's like, no, he wasn't. Most of the time, he just like let people talk crap about him, and then he just walked away.
Okay, fair enough. So like, I mean, we hear about... that's a fair enough point. So I'm asking you, if the Prophet himself, you've told me that if I were to insult the Prophet to his face, and you've given examples of poets who said all sorts of stuff to his face, and his response was whatever, why would his followers take it upon themselves, whether it be in vigilante style or by the law, in a state level, to then punish people for insulting the Prophet when he would not have done that himself? So actually, you're not following the sunnah of the Prophet. If he's saying, if his actions were don't retaliate against insults, and then his followers are like, if you insult the Prophet, I'm going to kill you or punish you or fine you or slap you on the wrist, whatever it is. How does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, to be honest. And I think it has a lot to do with, sorry, I'm looking at something.
That's fine.
It has a lot to do with, like I said, it has nothing to do with so much as personal feelings as it has to do with sort of trying to protect the honor and reputation of an individual as from the scholarly perspective. So, and I guess you could say even that the scholars sort of interpreted that offense as also casting like dishonor upon the entire Muslim community, because they took him as an example. So like if you say X person is a pedophile, and all of these people claim to be following this individual, it's sort of almost implicitly stating that all of these people are following the example of that. You know what I'm trying to say?
Oh, I understand that, but that's neither here or there. Let's say, for example,
I'm just giving you what their reasoning would have been, and for them, it was also his character and the divine decrees and the Quran and stuff were actually foundational to the society itself. So it was almost as though you were undermining the incomplete civilizational values that these people held. And for them, that was beyond reproach. Or, excuse me, beyond any sort of like, what is it? That was just beyond the pale. Like, you can't do that. Like I said, it's up to you whether you agree or disagree with this. But for me, and as far as I'm concerned, as long as these people in this society are not imposing it upon other civilizations or expecting other people outside of their own societal context to abide by that, then that's their business.
So in short, you don't think, to summarize, in short, you don't think, from what I understand, Islam supports free speech?
I don't think any society truly supports free speech.
Well, I mean, some do more than others.
Or free expression. Well, that's even then there's no absolutist understanding of what that means. I mean, if you want like an absolute understanding of free speech, anybody can say whatever they want ever. No society exists like that. There's no society like that. There are limitations everywhere under different.
Again, incitement to violence, or like, for example, I can't go into court and start lying and say free speech. But that's a very.
But why don't we condemn those things? I mean, why do we
condemn what?
Why do we allow those limitations? You know what I mean? Like, if you actually look deep into these certain things, you go, okay, well, there are practical reasons why we don't allow for people to slander and libel or go into a court and lie, et cetera, because it causes certain detriment to that society or to the individuals who it's being directed to, right? We kind of imply these things, but then when it comes to like other things within a different societal context where it might harm them or might harm their understanding of these institutions or the individuals' reputations, all of a sudden we say, well, they have more limited free speech. Well, it's like, okay, well, maybe from your particular societal construct they do, but for them, like, they can talk about everything else. It's not like a problem for them. It's not something that they feel any sort of limitation for. And
just on that point, you said that, for example, if I lie in court, that's different to, that's actually tangible harm, because if someone's, I don't know, being tried for murder and I say he did do it,
well, it's tangible, to be honest.
Well, I mean, you're imprisoning someone for something
that's a tangible harm. But for example, even like I said, reputation, that's not really
intangible.
But it still hurts people. I mean, you have.
Are we getting into hurts people in the sense you called me fat, I'm hurt?
No. Like being like, okay, so if you spread a lie about somebody, it doesn't put them in jail or anything like that, but it destroys their relationships.
Oh yeah, that can happen. I agree, but that's just gossip. But are you going to punish people for gossip?
Well, actually, you can. I mean, if you prove it's slander, you can punish people for gossip, even in the United States. So there are certain limits. Okay, so let me throw an olive branch here. All right, and this is going to piss off a lot of people. Excuse my French. but speaking of the French, right? The reason that I'm upset at France for banning hijab and things like this has nothing to do with freedom of expression or freedom of this or freedom of that. That's their own business. I don't care what sort of rules they implement in their own society. If they don't want to have hijab in their society, that's their business. And I feel the Muslims have a right to leave. Okay. The reason that I feel that France is being this way is because I think it has a very I think it's being hypocritical to what their own stated standards are, and I feel that they are unjustly going after one particular group.
Yep, I would agree with that also.
Okay, but I wouldn't condemn France for being like, we want all our women not to wear headscarves. That's their business. You know what I mean? But
I understand. I don't understand this. It's their business. Therefore, I mean, if there was a country that that had a savage practice of killing, I don't know, the second son of their family, I just make something up, and you say, well, it's okay. It's their country. They
can disagree with it all you want. That's fine. But there's a difference between disagreeing and then forcing those people to change. So, for example, one of the reasons that I have such a problem with a lot of these universalist statements by a lot of societies with respect to what other societies do, like Muslim societies do, right? One of the reasons that I have such a problem with it is because they've been used as an excuse to completely obliterate those countries.
What do you mean?
Like, for example, Iraq. Like, yes, the first lie was that they had weapons of mass destruction. But after that was exposed, the next argument was worse. I don't know if you're familiar with the discourse around the Iraq War, but it was basically like, we need to free these people.
Oh, yeah.
That was basically the argument in a nutshell. We need to free them from their own values.
I mean, that was just a cover for the mistake.
Oh, yeah, it is. But but that's how people actually justified it. I'm not even joking. Like, that's how the people didn't look at it as some sort of illusion. Like, they literally believed this was a good thing to do. And that's one of the reasons that I hate a lot of these talks about, what other countries should be doing about their laws and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, to what point do you disagree that you're going to force them to change? If they all, for example, let me give you one. Say everyone agrees in a Muslim country that you should chop the hand off for thievery. Okay, and you don't agree with it, right? Because your values don't allow you to think that that's okay.
Okay.
Right. At what point do you say those people can do what they want? And at what point do you say we need to go there and bomb them and slaughter half their population to get them to change?
Oh, I would consider myself a libertarian, so I'm completely against violence in the first place. But
or even put like sanctions on them. And these are all people that agree with this punishment. Okay, it's not like they're all oppressed by their own agreement. Like they all think it's okay to do this.
I mean, if you're asking me as an individual, I would say the best way to change their mind is to have discourse, is to talk to them, and free speech.
Okay, fine. That's fine. We can have discourse and things like this, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is when you start to try to impose your values upon other societies, and that's the point I'm trying to get across. So, say a Muslim society has these particular rules, as long as they're not forcing, say, France or Europe in general to follow their standards. I honestly, what they do in their country, that's between them. Okay. And likewise, what France does in its country, as long as it's not forcing they do force other people around the world, to be honest, but that's a different discussion. So
yeah.
Then they can do what they want. And I think that the Muslims that are living in France right now are being oppressed because these rules are just being introduced now, just for the sake of oppressing that particular group of people. It has nothing to do with free speech or expression. It's just because they want to force these people to conform to their values after they've lived there for so long. So there's a level of injustice there that I feel is not even warranted on the basis of social contract, because the people who were initially there to begin with, who never had these rules, are now being forced to follow them. When they moved into this country, knowing that wasn't the case before. It's kind of like a bait and switch.
Right.
That's not fair. You know what I mean? So that's one of the reasons I don't like France right now, is because they're so hypocritical. I don't like France in general. I never liked it. And that's probably because I'm also American, but and Spanish. That's two combinations of people who don't like France. Yeah. So, but anyways.
Fair enough. So we were speaking for maybe like an hour and a half now. So I'm going to take questions.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, time has flown past. I'm going to take questions from the comment section, because I know everyone here has been very patient. I've got tons of comments, tons of questions for you, Asadullah. You're a very popular man right now. So I'm going to go for, hang on a second, let me see some questions. Islamic morals, how do they make sense? Like Islamic Talaaq law, that's the divorce law, or not being able to marry your foster sister, or men not wearing gold.
Okay.
Because I actually went to a Muslim school, and I remember the Islamic teacher said that it's not permissible for men to wear gold. I was like, what? I don't get it. Why? So if you've got any gold chains underneath that shirt of yours, you want to show?
No, I don't.
So I mean, so things like that. How would you make sense of that?
There's some ritualistic preferences within the.
Sorry.
Within the fiqh, there are certain ritualistic preferences that are stipulated in the Quran and the fiqh that have no practical value outside of the fact that Allah wants you to do them. To be honest, that's how many scholars have argued too. Like, for instance, the whole pork thing. It's like there is no. They didn't say Allah didn't say you can't eat pork because it's unhealthy. He just doesn't want you to eat it.
So it's just preference.
It's kind of like a test. It's like a test of following, and in order to demarcate between other societies. That's really it. So there are certain rituals like, for instance, there's no health benefits behind prayer.
Oh, actually, one could argue that there are, but I mean,
I guess you could say psychologically.
Yeah, okay.
Like there's no physical, but I could also argue psychologically it's good to follow these rules because it gives you a sense of purpose and a communal,
right.
But that's like. That's not really the purpose that it was revealed for.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, there are certain things, like even wearing the headscarf, like, that's a form of modesty. That's what it says in the Quran, but it doesn't go beyond, like, that general understanding. Like, there's a lot of people now who are saying, like, hair is, like, attractive. Like, no, that's not it. It's like, it has nothing to do with it because the hair was attractive. You know what I mean? Like, it's because they wanted to demarcate between other societies who are not veiling or covering themselves appropriately, and of course there is some level of sexuality involved in that. And the same thing with men not having to wear like super tight shirts and things like this, or things like that.
So that's a very interesting point. I And I actually respect you for saying that, because normally we hear the opposite, like, oh, I actually remember this in what do you want to call it? When I was in Islamic school, one of the teachers, I can't remember if it was a teacher or student, said that there's a scientific reason why men shouldn't wear gold. It's because of the chemical reaction between their skin
That's
and
nonsense.
Sorry?
That's nonsense.
Right, exactly. But this is what I'm trying to say is that they went to that extent to try and justify this rule or law, whatever. But you're just clearly saying it's just
some
preference.
of the rules don't have any particular like practical hookum behind them. They're just there. They might be just for the sake of demarcating between other religious communities. It might be just for the sake of testing people. Like the scholars have even differentiated between things that have practical value versus those that don't. They're just there for the purpose of following.
But I mean, something like the three divorce, like when you say I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you 3 times. Yeah. I mean, that is not simply a preference like gold or silver.
No. That was to make sure that, divorce wasn't this easy thing, and that you could just like do, just immediate, like you think about it first. You have chances. You know what I mean? Don't just give up on your wife because she made you angry or something. Like that's not how you should treat divorce. And there are a lot of rules even in the Quran that try to mitigate a lot of abuses towards people. You know what I mean? That were actually occurring in that society at the time. A lot of horrible abuses. There's several examples, even with regard to slaves. You know what I mean? Like looking at, there are a lot of passages in the Quran that say treat your slave well. I mean, like, you're thinking like, why would it say this? It's like, because how slaves were treated back then was horrible. They would just like treat them like they were nothing. They were just cattle, right?
Yeah.
And so the Quran came and revealed these things like, look, if you're going to have a slave, if you have a slave, treat them nicely, don't hurt them, don't beat them, don't do these horrible things. And if they ask you to be free and you see good character in them, then let them go free. Give them some of your wealth even and let them go.
Sure. Just a couple of things. First on the divorce thing. From what I understand, when I was in the Islamic school, it's even if it's not even like, let's say for example, I get into an argument with my wife and I say divorce you. It's not even like in that moment. Let's say I am married to her over a 10-year period, and I say over that 10-year period, I divorce you. Then 2 years later, I say I divorce you again, and then 5 years later, I say I divorce you again. That still counts as one.
It counts in the fiqh if it's been registered.
If it's registered, what does that mean? As in, I've gone to a court or something?
Yeah, because the thing is that the courts are the only ones that can really verify whether the person has.
But I mean, from what I understand, it's not
that's a general rule, but it's a general rule that you shouldn't do that. But I mean, like these people have this like absolutist understanding that, I was in the privacy of my home and I said 3 times because I was angry, and then some scholars took it really seriously, and then a lot of other scholars were kind of like, well, it also bases on your intention, and you didn't even register. I mean, you didn't go to a qadi or anything, so it's like it's not really there. Just make up and just don't do it again.
I mean, would the wife have the same right over the husband? Like
the wife has a right over the husband in terms of whether or not he's fulfilling her duties,
but not the right to divorce in the same manner.
Not the right to divorce in the same manner.
Why?
Because she's not the one financially. She's not the one. So let me put it this way. So the guy, right? He's the one supporting her financially completely. Okay, he's the one who after the divorce occurs, he has to give her alimony and child support and everything else. If she's divorced, for her to divorce him, she has to have some sort of like, reason beyond simply like, oh, I don't like him. You know what I mean? Because there's no real repercussions for her in the event that the divorce occurs.
But I mean, that's interesting because I believe that the Prophet was employed by his wife who earned more money than him. So if she said, well, I'm actually supporting you because I've employed you.
In that case, then that's the interesting thing. That's lovely that you brought that up, because in the fiqh, if it's the woman who's supporting the guy, then he actually loses all rights to her and she has a right to divorce him at any point in time.
Right.
Because the thing is that within the Islamic legal structure, what happens is that the guy has to do certain things, right? He has to support her, he has to maintain her, he has to do this, and that, right? He can't beat her, he can't do all these horrible things, right? Because if she does, then she can go to a qadi, and then they could just, that's it, done, khalas, marriage is over, okay? Like, she can just do that like that very easily. However, he has more of like an ease to kind of divorce her, even if he doesn't like her, because there's not really any repercussions. She just gets all the money. She still gets everything from him after that happens. So he's actually hurting himself more by doing so. So that was kind of like their reasoning behind all of that.
Fair enough. So I want to ask a different question here. Someone said, regarding apostasy law, Asadullah argued that it is moral within Sharia law that an atheist gets executed because him being vocal minimizes the happiness of the majority of Muslims.
I never said that at all. That's a straw man, and that's
slander.
I mean, I think you're referring to Daniel Haqiqatju. So
that's someone else.
You can go do that.
But I mean, do you agree with that statement he made?
No, I don't agree with that statement he made.
So it's nothing about minimizing, maximizing happiness. That's why.
No, it has nothing to do with that. I don't even agree with that whole entire understanding of how laws are formulated. Why?
So, I mean, would you be, from your understanding, do you think it's moral or Islamic, whatever you want to call it, to execute someone for leaving their religion?
Do I think it's moral? In the contemporary context, no.
Okay, so do you think it's moral? Like, I think, you.
Like, no.
Islamically, what's the position on that?
Oh, it depends on whether or not you're an imperial society. I brought this up in a former conversation with Armin Navabi and others, and Ali Rizvi. You know, the whole purpose behind the apostasy law in the past was that your religion was tied to your citizenship, and there was a constant state of war around you. So if you abandoned that religion, it was like as though you were committing treason by joining the other side. And even then, that law was not always implemented back then either. The Prophet sometimes let people go if he didn't see them as a threat. So in the fiqh, it is determined that if somebody leaves their faith, that they should be killed. However, that fiqh was developed within the context of the imperial state. As that started to sort of like dwindle, the imperialist state started to dwindle, scholars started to change their interpretations of not only both the apostasy laws, but also in terms of how warfare should be conducted. So, for example, there are a lot of scholars within the 20th, 21st century, even prior to the fall of the Ottoman Empire, that were starting to develop these positions saying, well, the empires, nation states are starting to become more popular. So how do we determine apostasy in a state that is no longer not only imperialistic, but that doesn't define its citizenship based on its religious values? So these discussions going back and forth. A lot of people disagree with me. There are some even Muslims that I've had to argue with respect to this, but it's actually a very common position, especially in academia. And if you look at, for example, Jonathan Brown's work on the subject matter, he develops this argument as well. He's a hadith scholar at Georgetown University, and you can read his work at Yaqeen Institute.
So they saw your religion as your sort of citizenship is something like that. So, for example,
they did. Even the Byzantines saw Christianity as a form. I mean, Thomas Aquinas was one of the first to formulate apostasy laws and punishments for the Christian nations. I mean, like, this was everywhere. It wasn't like the Muslims just randomly came up with it one day, you know. This was a very common position to take during imperial times, at least in the classical imperial age.
I mean, would you not just count that as treason? I mean, like, for example, if I leave Islam, but I am still following the laws of the land, I don't want some sort of insurrection or rebellion within the laws of the land.
Well, they would interpret it as though if you didn't they didn't see, like, a lot of scholars didn't see a point in you like publicizing it to the world if that was the case. Like, you would just kind of like just mind your own business, leave. You know what I mean? Don't, you know, for them it was like sort of a declaration that you were willing to fight the state. Now, they didn't always take it that way. That was the general rule. but sometimes they give exceptions to people and they would just let them leave. You know what I mean? But so it's not as black and white as people put it.
But I mean, what is your position? I mean, now, would you categorically deny it, or say no, it may have some use?
Well, it would depend if the conditions returned, but they haven't. We're not even in that. It's impossible to even resurrect those the structure of that.
So I mean,
it's like there are no conditions that would allow that to occur now. You see what I'm trying to say?
I understand. So would you say
it doesn't?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with like marrying 9-year-old girls. The conditions right now do not allow for that to occur.
See, so on the question of 9-year-old girls, I understand that, you know, we were talking about before on a biological level or even on a societal level, children was, again, rightly or wrongly, was seen.
Give me 1 second. I'm sorry, Dre man. Revert Ali mentioned a Kufar academic. Nice move. Jonathan Brown is a convert to Islam, so piss off.
Yeah, he's a Muslim.
Anyways, move on. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. So I was saying that with regards to Aisha being 9, I mean, I this is going to sound, it might sound strange. I don't think she was actually 9, and I'm saying this as a non-Muslim, not because I'm trying to save the honor of the Prophet, but because I've heard different arguments. But even if you were to assume she was 9, just because people did things back in those days which they saw as acceptable or practical even, and they may have had some justifications for marrying a 9-year-old, 10-year-old because they didn't live that long and they live a different lifestyle, whatever it is. I mean, this is going back to what I was saying to you earlier about if you beat your child when they're young, you can actually scientifically prove with the data and stats, whatever it is, this is bad for them because of the whatever. They have said the same thing, that there's a part of your brain that hasn't even developed when you're that young, or even until the age of, I think it was on Dr. Phil, I can't remember now, on age of 17 or 18, a part of your brain has not developed. So you don't necessarily understand the future consequences of your present actions. And especially when it comes to consenting in marriage. Forget about this, we can talk about sex as well, but the actual consent to your marriage at that young of an age where you don't even know anything about life because you have only lived 9 years. Most of them you would in the sort of lap or the sort of arms of your mother or father. How on earth can a 9-year-old even understand, foresee, comprehend something like marriage? And
well, I think that you're not. No offense, I don't think you've read the bioarchaeology of children. I mean, behave psychosocially and biologically, children have developed much differently over time. Even in the contemporary period, it's remarkably different. If you read previous studies, I mean, my paper is coming out. I don't want to get too much detail. I have a paper coming out on it very soon from the Akin Institute that shows all of that scientific evidence that shows that people back then were definitely very, very different, especially even in their younger years. They were far more mature or prepared to accept that sort of lifestyle. So I want to deal with some of the people in your comment section just for fun, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Let's see. Who am I going to pick on? All right. Oh, stop spamming is in here. That's interesting. You know, I found it really fascinating when you had a discussion with him, because this is one of the things that I have a problem with. We talked earlier about the whole internet culture and how knowledge is perceived and things like this. You know, I think I had some run-ins with him in the past, and it's interesting how he claims that his entire channels were taken down because, you know, Muslims are trying to take him down, and because YouTube is being run by Muslims and things like this. It's conspiratorial sort of things. You know, but it's like this sort of these very trite and juvenile opinions about Islam masked as this like respective dialogue when you're constantly harassing people and making sock accounts to insult them. You know, this is the reason that a lot of people can't have the sort of discussions that we're having today, is because of these individuals sort of coming under the guise of respectful dialogue and intellectual discourse. And you know what else is really interesting? You and I are sitting here and we are having a discussion, showing our faces in front of the world, without any sort of animosity between you or I. And yet a lot of the people who who constantly keep bashing on Islam and Muslims about not having intellectualism or free speech and all this stuff, they are always the ones to hide themselves and their behaviors and their characters behind a computer screen, and have these little avatars and make all these sock accounts and things like this. And I feel that that's also very problematic. And I say this to Muslims as well. You should not do these things. This is not helping the discourse. It's not helping people express themselves in the appropriate manner to have actual discussions. If you want to be a troll, that's fine, but don't expect people to take you seriously, or you're called to respectful dialogue if you're going to act like one. That's
okay. Sorry. Yeah.
So I just want to go after him because he's really pathetic. And let's see who else.
So just to that point, interesting point about not showing a face. I mean, I understand that some people, due to the nature of their work or where they live, they can't reveal their identity because it could, I don't know, have serious implications about their family life, or they might get fired from work, or a whole host of reasons. So I understand that. I mean, I do sympathize with that. But one may, if I'm being facetious, and please allow me to be facetious once in a while.
Go ahead, no, it's fine.
1 second. What if stop spamming is a niqabi?
That would be funny as hell. No, but I've heard his voice. He sounds like some middle-aged guy having a nervous breakdown because he lives in.
But what if he is a transgendered? Because you do get some of them nowadays. Niqab, I mean, whatever. Would you be against niqab then? Because we don't know. I could be speaking to a woman. Well, I think she's a woman, but I have no idea who she is.
I don't live in Malaysia. I live in the U.S. So the problem with online anonymity is that you don't have any sort of presence of the individual. So there is utterly no consequences for their convictions. And what I mean by that is not death or anything like this. What I mean is by personal rebuke. Okay. Are these individuals' lives being found out? I feel like a lot of these people who hide behind the internet have less to do with a woman's reason for hiding her face. I think it has more to do with the fact that they want to hide their personal lives because they're concerned of being found out about what they're hiding. See, I like to show myself I have nothing to hide. You know what I mean? And I've been threatened by ISIS members themselves, okay, in person in Malaysia when I was acting out against them by the authority of the Malaysian government. I was actually speaking out against. I had them come up to me personally and threaten to kill me and my family. I've never worn a mask. Okay, so I see a lot of these people, and I just feel like they're hiding something else. That said, I
mean, but okay. I mean, what if? I mean, because I remember, because especially in Britain, things are very politically correct, and if someone were to be saying something controversial about politics or religion or whatever it may be, or even feminism on YouTube, and they got found out, and it has happened many times where people have said stuff on YouTube or Twitter, and then they get fired from work, and it's completely not because they're not doing well at their work, it's because, well, this doesn't look too good, and that therefore they just sort of don't reveal their faces. Or so
I just think that a lot of people they just lack conviction. If you're going to have an opinion, just say it. If you're worried about what people are going to think of you, or if they're going to find out that you work at some sort of job or something, you're pathetic. You are pathetic. That's as far as I understand it. You are pathetic. You have no business talking about free speech and expression when you're too scared to even show your face when you're making an opinion. I'm sorry. Okay, you are
That's very strong words.
No, you are a pathetic person. I lived in Malaysia for almost 10 years. I was threatened by extremists themselves. I was even almost assaulted a few times, and I never, ever, ever had the urge to hide my face. And here we are, we got a bunch of masked morons online who have no education whatsoever and who are just blasting out their opinions like nothing, who think that they're so brave. You guys are pathetic losers who would not stand one day fighting for anything, even your own balls. Okay, you would have them cut off to hide your face. You are pathetic.
Well,
I'm done.
You certainly don't mince your words on that. In case you missed that, guys, you're pathetic. I'm joking. Yeah,
it's true. No, I'm sorry. It's true. It's so true. These are not men. These are a bunch of beta males hiding behind the computer because they're scared mommy and daddy's going to find out. Okay, that's it. That's all it is.
Wow.
And I'm happy about it to say that. I wanted to say that for a long time. You deserve it. I don't care.
I'm happy that you found this channel to freely express your views.
I tried.
I think it's great. I actually prefer this Asadullah more. I'm not gonna lie. This is a guy that I can get on with.
No. Oh, they hide because Muslims want to get. Nobody wants to kill you. You are irrelevant. You're some random guy on the internet. Nobody wants to kill you. My Sheikh Omar Suleiman, has been personally listed on the hit list of ISIS. Okay, nobody's gonna be Alvin Prakesh or Tom Clements or all these other idiots. DNA 598. Oh, we need to go kill them because they're making fun of Islam on the internet. You guys are nothing. Literally nothing. What the hell?
Okay, so I mean, there have been cases where some people in Bangladesh, bloggers.
Oh no! You want to talk about Bangladesh? We can. That's fine. Okay, so this is a huge lie that Sarah Hayter and all these other people always keep talking about, like these bloggers. They're writing stuff about Islam, and who, by the way, they're more brave than these people because at least they show their faces. They're writing about Islam, so they're getting killed. because they're criticizing Islam. You don't know half of it. Have you ever read the story about some of these bloggers? I'm not justifying it, by the way. I want to be very clear here. They were murdered. Okay, it was unjust what happened to them. But they weren't killed because they were criticizing Islam. They were killed because on their own blogs, and these are every single one of these bloggers, or at least the majority of them, all right, they called for this movement, this protest movement called Shabag. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with it. And the Shabag movement was calling on the government, run by a secular party, run by a woman, also, by the way. So that's not very fundamentalist, okay? And basically, this party, Sheikh Hasina, came up with this rule, these trumped up charges that, okay, we're going to start charging people for what happened in the 1970s for some independence war, and we're going to execute these people, okay? And they started to go after Islamist leaders in the country, the opposition party. So these secular bloggers called for this movement where they were openly calling for the prosecution and execution of Islamist leaders in the country. It was after that some of these people within that group decided to kill them. It wasn't because they were criticizing Islam. That's nonsense. Okay, and especially since the majority of the Islamists in the country had counter-protest and did not commit any violence at all. So I'm sorry, I don't want to say that these people deserve to die, but what I want to say is that it's a ridiculous myth that they're just being hunted down randomly because they happen to criticize it. They were criticizing Islam before they were killed. Nobody cared until they joined that movement and started calling for the execution of Islamist leaders in the country. So I wish people would please stop talking like this. It had nothing to do with them criticizing. They were trying to get other people killed. Okay, like this is not cool. This is not, you shouldn't be lionizing these people. They have problems too. Like that's just not cool to be making it out to be like that.
Okay, so I don't know too much about the Bangladeshi blogger, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. Can I ask a strange question?
Please go. I'm ran out of breath.
Or
it's not
rather,
even conspiracy. People say it's conspiracy. Like, look at the news, for God's sake. Research it. Don't start just looking at Wikipedia or listening to what some of these other ex-Muslims are saying about it. Okay, actually research what happened. You will find everything I just said was correct. It's in the New York Times, for God's sake. It's not conspiracy.
So what about the guy in Pakistan, Mashal Khan, in university? I mean, that was tragic what happened to him. I mean,
it was tragic. No, it was tragic. I'm just saying that the majority of these people who have been hunted down and killed by these crazies, okay, is because it has nothing to do with them criticizing. All right, I'm just telling you, like there was more stuff going on here than meets the eye. It's not that black and white. And that's all I'm trying to say is, like, you want to condemn these people for killing, for murdering people, then fine, please do so. It was immoral. Okay, but stop making it out this narrative where it's just like, oh, one day some guy was just like, I don't agree with Islam, and then they just got killed. That's not what happened.
But I mean, surely you recognize that there is a risk when someone does criticize Islam within a Muslim majority country.
No, not all of them. I mean, obviously not all
Oh,
of them.
not every single person, but I mean, like there is a substantial.
Not even all the countries. I mean, there's like, I've known ex-Muslims in Malaysia who are openly criticizing, even in Malaysia Kini, which is like this very famous online publication, and like nothing ever happened to them. I mean, like I said, it's so overblown. It's come to this like mythological like story, like there's a massive epidemic against ex-Muslims and everyone's going around, all the Muslims are foaming at the mouth waiting to kill everyone that criticizes. It's like, no.
I mean, what about like Mashal Khan definitely got.
Yeah, like I think that what happened to him was, even though I don't even know the details behind that entirely.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, I think that was wrong. And I'm telling you right now, even what happened to the Bangladeshi bloggers was wrong. But
I'm not saying I agree. I'm not saying that you think it's right to just get up and kill someone because you whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that
the reason why that it's like, you can look up what I'm telling you right now. There was a lot more behind these stories than just just people saying stuff and then someone getting killed. Okay. There's a lot more to it.
Yeah, look, I understand that. But what I'm trying to say is that there is certainly a risk when it comes to criticizing or mocking, or even as a Muslim, if you criticize Islam. I mean, even as a Muslim, if you criticize a particular kind of Islam,
I think that there's a danger mostly of jailing in certain countries like Pakistan.
I mean, Pakistan's a real explosive case with the best of
I have no doubt about that. But like, if you're going to, I think it's really ridiculous when a lot of people make it out to be like every Muslim country is like, it's like, no, it isn't. Like, there is so much stuff going on. Like, you're more likely to be thrown in jail in Malaysia for criticizing the king than you are for criticizing Islam. I mean, like, that's just the fact, and the thing is, like, you hear these ridiculous one-sided, very black and white opinions. It's nonsense.
Well, I would say in Pakistan, you're more likely to be killed if you criticize or make fun of Islam.
I'm not doubtful about certain places. I'm just telling you. Like,
Pakistan is a terror. I mean, I'm from Pakistan, but unfortunately,
like, if you want to make an argument, for example, I'm going to tell people, if you're going to make an argument about apostasy laws, right, it would better to focus on Pakistan than would, for example, Bangladesh, where, by the way, the people who murdered those bloggers were also sentenced to prison and then executed by the state. So it's like, what are you trying to say, that Bangladesh supports murdering bloggers, yet at the same time the government kills the people who murdered them? That makes no sense.
I'm not saying that the government asked these people to kill the bloggers. I'm saying there is an environment, unfortunately, or an atmosphere where it's very difficult to criticize Islam. So even if the government says, don't kill these people, unfortunately, there is even a small minority, but that is a empowered minority or a stimulated minority that does take things into their own hands, and which is why the original debate was about anonymity. If some people, I mean, we talk about stop spamming, but it could be anyone who is making videos or criticizing or writing, even not even necessarily videos, but they're not showing their face. It could be for a whole host of reasons, and given the climate within some Muslim countries, it might be a wise thing not to show your face. I mean, someone mentioned Raif Badawi.
Okay, well, let's argue that that's the case, right? Okay, tell me, all the people who are currently hiding their faces, the popular ex-Muslims online, where are they? Because they're not in Pakistan, they're not in Saudi Arabia, they're not in Iraq, they're in like the UK and in America, and they're just, what they're doing is they're playing off this sentiment that all these Muslims want to kill them. Okay, they're playing off the bigoted sentiments that majority of Muslims are hunting them down as we speak because they make YouTube videos. I mean, that is just retarded.
What I would say to that is that some ex-Muslims in non-Muslim countries have unfortunately been shunned, or on some level even violently, what do you want to call it, have had some sort of violence acted towards them because of their apostasy. I remember that I was watching a story of this Somalian guy, and I think it was America or Canada, I can't remember now, where he went back home, he tried to reconcile with his family, and the men in his family, I think he was from a Somalian background, they took him downstairs to the whatever that room where you, whatever, and surrounded him and whatever, beat him up, whatever it was. It does happen.
It does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't. What I'm trying to argue against, and people don't understand what I'm saying, is that there's like this massive epidemic. Okay, like, I think I can find more people killed in road rage than I can for people killed just because they were apostates. No offense. And I'm not trying to say that somehow makes it less of a problem. But what I am saying is that people have blown it up to such an extent that now it's like, every Muslim they talk to, they got to be careful because, they might kill them or something. It's like, come on, bro. Like, this is really getting ridiculous.
I agree with you on that. I don't think any Muslim you talk to is, oh my God, they've got a knife in their back pocket and they're going to stab you the moment you say you're an apostate. I don't think that is true. However, I'm going to keep going back to Pakistan because, it really is for example, we've got a question there saying, how can Muslims combat the extremists among them, like those who glorified the murder of Salman Taseer? Are you familiar with that case in Pakistan?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, so for example, the murderer got a massive...
How can Muslims deal with this? How can the majority of Muslims combat these issues?
Or even the Muslims in Pakistan. Forget about the majority, let's outside Pakistan.
Okay, well,
if you're a Muslim in Pakistan...
Yeah, I would say, first off, that we have to understand that the extremists that are operating in these countries right now, who are going around doing these things and killing people, okay, they're just as much of a threat to an ex-Muslim as they are to regular Muslims around them. And I think that needs to be understood, that there is a reason, a motivation that a lot of Muslims should be standing up and saying something, not simply because they're targeting ex-Muslims, because they're also being targeted themselves. And I would say about anything, and this has been proven right now, even in a lot of contemporary studies, is that the more Islamic education you have, and the more that you appeal to traditional sources and things like this, the more likely you are to help convince others not to do these things. And I also think that's from the ideological perspective. And then you have also, of course, other things that need to be dealt with in terms of like counterterrorism stuff. So, for example, when you talk about Pakistan, and I have proof for this, by the way. So I hope the trolls in the chat can deal with it. I don't think they can. I think they're going to kill themselves. So there's a recent study, a research note on a case study in Pakistan that proved that the more that somebody has been inducted in madrasa education, the less likely they are to support extremist groups in the country. So, for example,
that's very interesting because I was watching that documentary on Netflix.
So let me tell you what the study is. You guys can look it up yourself. Okay. So here we go. Can knowledge of Islam explain lack of support for terrorism? Evidence from Pakistan from tandfonline.com. Basically, they found that among the population there that they surveyed, they found that there was less support for extremist organizations in the country and less support for terrorism in general, the more knowledge of Islam that they had. The less that they had and the less education they had in the religion itself, the more likely they were to join these organizations. There are also several other studies in the past year and prior to that showing the same case for ISIS members. Studied and written by the United States Armed Forces. And I can provide all of these later if you want. You can put them in the description box. It's up to you.
I'm more than happy for you to post it now if you wish.
Let me see if I can do that.
But on the flip side, I would also say there are many well-read, educated scholars or people who have studied Islam who do believe apostasy laws. There was that guy in Pakistan, I can't remember the guy's name now, it's really annoying me, but there was a Netflix documentary about him who's basically an extremist, and he's a recognized extremist, but very well read. He's someone who's got a lot of what you want to call it, knowledge, whatever you want to call it. Okay. And of course, we need to look at the people in Saudi and the Medina University and all these people. I mean, they would say that they have Islamic knowledge and traditional knowledge. Traditional knowledge, but they still believe apostates should be killed and all the rest of it, all the other things that maybe you don't even agree with, they do agree with, and they certainly uphold. So, I mean, what would you say with that?
Well, who are these people?
So, for example, if you look at Saudi scholars or people that agree with apostasy laws and all these different things that even you wouldn't agree with necessarily, they would say,
What scholars in particular? I mean, in what context do they agree with them? So, for example, I would say I agree with it within certain conditions, but I wouldn't say that I agree with it for example, in contemporary period.
Now, if someone from a learned position in Islam said that they would agree with it in contemporary period,
okay, so
is that not a problem?
Yeah, I would consider it problematic, and that's something that we can disagree with. But we're also looking at whether does the ideology lead to praxis, and I think that's one of the biggest issues that I have. And like I said, no study has revealed that that's the case. That's why also I laugh about these little surveys from Pew regarding like people's opinions about what Sharia is and how it should be implemented. It's like, okay, so what? It's like, you know how many people in the United States think it's okay to kill innocent people overseas? Like over 52% of the population. And it's like, you don't see them walking around murdering people as a result of that. So, like I said, there's a difference between ideological standards and praxis, and that's something that people don't seem to comprehend very well.
Okay. So let's get to some more questions. What do you think of Mufti Abu Layth?
I don't like him.
Why?
No, I don't like. It's not that I don't know him personally. I just don't think. I think he's extremely. He has this methodology where he tries to choose minority opinions over everything else in order to make it. His whole methodology is basically like, let's make it as comfortable as possible, and I don't like that. I don't think that's the right way of doing it. I feel that methodology is very, very. There's no validity behind it.
I mean, he would say that he is referring to classical texts and classical scholars.
Yeah, he does, but he appeals to only minority opinions, those that have been rejected by the consensus.
So do you think he's purposely doing this, or is it just a strange... I mean, why do you think he's doing this?
Why do you think he's doing this?
Yeah,
I don't know the minority opinion. I don't necessarily know his intentions, to be honest.
Okay.
I think he said something in the past regarding wanting to make it easy for Muslims in the West or something. I don't recall exact where he's coming from, but I don't think his methodology is appropriate. But that's personally, like, I don't know him personally. Like, I can't say like, oh, the guy's a bad guy or something. I don't know who he is.
Okay. I just want to know how are you good for time, because just so we can pace.
I don't have much time left, but I will say that I can still keep engaging with the comment section if you want.
Yeah.
Like,
so
the whole thing is like, okay, so let me see. Is there anything, do you want me to answer anything in particular? You want me to just look at it? And see?
Yeah. So I'm just going to pick out some interesting questions here. Someone is saying, can Ali summarize why he believes in Islam over, say, Christianity, or a follower of Thor, or an atheist?
Okay, because I used to be a Christian, so the reason that I would say Islam is better is because it's more coherent in terms of its Aqidah, in terms of how it understands former religions and things like this. So that would be the general response. So I've given a very more lengthy response to why I joined Islam, became a follower of Islam in my story video, which you can all watch.
Yep. And can I ask you some more questions?
Yeah, sure. So it's like, for example, let me give you some more before you go on. So like, here's some more evidence of sort of kind of the idiocy that we see online. Sorry, I have to pick on some of your chat guys. So, for example, I have somebody in here. What is his name? Abu something. Okay, great. So I'm basically, I don't know what I'm talking about because I can't pronounce Arabic terms.
Okay, that's stupid. Come on.
Okay, yeah, that is pretty stupid. No, apparently not being able to pronounce things perfectly means that my current PhD candidacy in Islamic studies has been overturned, and the guy working retail who speaks better Arabic than me is more knowledgeable on the subject. Yeah.
Yep.
So, okay, anyways, moving on.
Yeah, so, I think I saw a question about how do you know the Quran is from God, so something like that. I can't believe it.
Let me see.
So how would you try and convince someone that the Quran is from God as opposed to any other scripture or whatever?
Oh, I would just appeal to the coherency of the narrative and other things like this.
I mean,
this is a much bigger discussion than me pointing out like one thing in 5 minutes.
Sure, so, but I mean, because a lot of people would say something. I had trouble with science and Quran. I know we touched on this earlier, but me and you kind of agree that we shouldn't do that. But unfortunately, a lot of Muslims still play this game. And they say, and actually, I mean, for example, how do you get around a virgin birth? I've really struggled with that one. With evolution, I was like, okay, maybe it's possible, maybe it's possible. With the virgin birth, I was like, where do I go with this, man? How do I try and reconcile that? I mean, do you believe in the virgin birth? If so, how does that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't see a problem with it. Like, I believe in God. I believe that Allah, gave revelation through an illiterate man. So why wouldn't I believe that it's possible for him to create a baby in somebody's stomach? It's not like a big deal for him to do that. That's why I always find it really funny when people always respond like, "You believe in flying horses," and I'm like, "What? You think that's like hard for God to do or something?" I don't get what the point of the objection was. You know what I mean? Like, I don't get it. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, why would that be a problem?
So this is that's a very interesting point there, because I don't think, even me, I understand, God can do anything. So if he wants to make a flying horse, or if he wants to do X, Y, and Z.
How is that even an incoherency? How is that even ridiculous? It's like, we make airplanes and rockets today. You're talking about the creator of the entire universe, and he can't make like his own thing. Like, why is that a problem? I don't get it.
Sure. I've actually got what do you want to call it? So it's not the fact that God, cannot do it, but rather it contradicts science. So I mean, science is the only, unfortunately or fortunately, how you look at it.
What's scientific about? I don't understand. Like, what? Okay, so so the whole night journey, right, that occurred in Allah.
Flying horse up to heaven.
The flying horse, whatever. It's not even a flying horse. That's just a crude interpretation of what it could be.
Creature, let's say, whatever.
And then he does it for like one night. I mean, how is science going to like verify something that happened in one event?
No, but that's the point. If I said to you, I saw a guy with two heads, or forget two heads. I saw a guy with a horse, and the horse had wings.
Okay.
You'd be like, "That's crazy, man. Come on."
Yeah, well, that's what. In what context are you saying it though? Like, so if you told me that the prophet of God, who I already believe is the prophet of God, did this, then it wouldn't be bothering to me. Like, I'd be like, okay.
So you're saying that you suspend your own scientific?
Well, no, I mean, like, our beliefs are not entirely dependent, corresponding with any sort of tangible evidence. Sometimes our beliefs are on the basis of whether it coheres with something that we already believe to be true. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
I understand what you're saying, but that's not a very solid foundation, right? Because
it is. Like, that's how we act all the time. So, for example, have you ever been up in space?
Nope.
Or seen the roundness of the Earth?
Oh, you flat earthed. Oh, come on.
I'm just saying, have you?
No, but we can. But I mean, I haven't physically seen it, but we can use math.
You haven't physically seen it, but you've determined it based on other things that cohere with your understanding of the.
No, but we can use objective means, math, science, geometry, whatever you want to call it, to verify that it is round or whatever it is. But there's
it's a good guess. That's the best way you can. There's no direct empirical observation of the phenomenon occurring. It's the most coherent based on the data that you have on hand. So,
but that's like me saying, I haven't seen my own brain, therefore I don't have one. But we can do an.
I would never say that.
Many people would. Many people would, believe it or not.
They're ridiculous. There's no reason to say that. I've never seen my brain, so how do I know I have one? Well, because it's coherent for you to believe that you do. It'd be retarded if you said you didn't. Like, it would just be like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to look at your brain to know that you have one. That's what I'm trying to say. That
people say I don't have
certain empirical facts, for example, that we understand are primarily based on how much they cohere to other to the data that we have on hand. So, for example, we know for a fact now that the Earth rotates around the sun, for example, right? But most people have not actually observed that phenomenon directly above where they can actually see it. We infer it based on the data being as coherent as possible. Bless you. And so it's like, that's what I don't understand. Is like, you want direct empirical knowledge of everything that occurs in religion. It's like, you don't even do that for yourself for everything that you already consider to be fact. You do it based on what you think is more coherent.
Sure. I want to make this last point, and then I want to go on to something else. Okay. The only thing I will say about that is that especially for an extraordinary claim, which is something which we do not observe in normal day-to-day life, which is like a virgin birth or a flying horse, then you would need a substantial amount of evidence, or basically evidence to back that claim up.
I don't even buy that whole entire thing about extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That doesn't seem like a claim that has any evidence. That claim itself doesn't have evidence. That makes no sense to me.
But I mean, do you not think that is an extraordinary claim to make?
No, it depends on, like I said, the worldview that you hold. Like, why would it be extraordinary to somebody who already believes in God? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, he knows that God can do this, so why would it be a problem for him?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's right. If God can do whatever he wants, God can.
if he can make a virgin birth, it's like, you believe in God. It's like, at that point, it's like, why do you think it's illogical for him to be able to snap his, just like metaphorically speaking, excuse me.
Yeah, I understand.
To be able to do something in an instant, without needing to abide by. That said.
Sure. Now, Asadullah, I've got a very special request for you. My wife wants to ask you a question. Are you okay with that?
Okay.
She's sitting next to me. If you're not okay with it, please let me know.
I mean, sure. I mean, I don't, whatever.
It's completely up to you. I don't want to put you on the spot or anything.
Okay.
Yeah, is that right?
Sure.
Yalla. Hang on. Here. This is
Hi.
Hello.
I've been watching, and I've had so many questions. I've been like, oh my God, there's so much I wanted to ask you. And I don't normally come on. Hey?
I'm getting double teamed now.
No, I'm not going to say anything.
No. I'm not going to kind of. Do you know what? There's so much I wanted to ask actually that I've actually forgotten most of it, because it was whilst you guys were talking. But just on this topic of talking about miracles and things that are happening out of the blue, this is just a random thing that popped into my head when you were saying that though. But why doesn't God intervene in other ways, right now, people starving, people dying all around the world, in Palestine and in Syria, if he can just kind of do things and have a horse with wings, or have Moses kind of split the sea and do all these kind of amazing things at that time, why isn't he doing anything now?
Well, he didn't do a lot of things before either.
Okay.
I mean, even during the time of those miracles, he was allowing people to kill other people and things like this. I mean, what you brought up basically is the problem of evil.
So what's the purpose? Okay, it's the problem of evil. Fine. So that's the whole nother. But what's the?
Yeah,
okay.
That's the whole discussion even you just brought up.
That's a whole nother thing.
Even prior to, even during the time that he was doing these miracles and things like this, he was still allowing other people to die and to starve. I mean, it wasn't like he was not doing anything different.
No, but that's not my point though. My point is that if he can intervene and he can kind of help people. If God is so loving and so caring, more than we are, is what we're supposed to believe. And I don't think I could watch anything that's kind of happening in Syria and not intervene. If that's something that I could do, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I understand. From a human perspective, that makes sense. But imagine that you could watch all this, what's going on, and you have a lot more knowledge of the events, and then at the end of it all, you can redeem you can just rectify it instantly. Whenever you feel like it, would you feel the same sentiment? I mean, right now, the reason you feel that way is because you can't do anything about it.
Oh, I don't even understand. Do you understand that point?
Yeah, you can't do anything about it. That's why you feel that way. But you're talking about a God.
I would feel more so if I could do something about it. I'd be like, I could actually do something, but I'm not.
So if I had a purpose for evil for existing, right? And by the way, I want to ask you a question after this as well.
Okay.
So I have a purpose for evil existing, okay? And I see all these horrible things happening around me. And I know at the end of the day that all of this is going to be rectified because I've decided upon it. All the people who have suffered or died, they're going to get justice. Regardless if it's now or later, I can do it whenever I want, okay? And I will do it, all right? So how would I feel? Okay, so if I don't intervene at this moment, what difference is that going to make?
Okay, so it's because you've decided. So the justice system afterwards is either you're going to burn for eternity, and that's justice. Is that justice to you?
For some people, it is. Yes.
But is it for you?
Is it for you?
No, yeah, it is for me. But I want to ask you a question.
You hesitated though because you didn't answer that question straight away. You said for some people it is. So obviously,
if I hesitated or not, it's still an answer. The point is that so I want to ask you a question before we get to the subject of hell, because I find that a fascinating discussion. But, okay, so you see this child starving, you see this woman being raped, you see this person being murdered, and it's over. That's it. There is no justice for them ever. They just die in the way that they are. It's an internal tragedy for the rest of humanity, for the existence of all existence. It has no purpose whatsoever. There is no God saying he's going to deal with it later. That person suffers and dies in that way without anything. How does that, in comparison to what you are opposing.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Is you want to believe. Otherwise, it's like a coping strategy almost.
Well, if it's a coping, okay, fine, that's fine. But I'm just asking you, you're trying to oppose
that's
God
my point
here.
of view.
The point of God, you're looking at the problem of evil and saying, okay, well, God, why is he not doing anything? It's like, well, he will. And then but your viewpoint, at least I'm assuming that you're not a believer.
No, yeah, that's correct assumption.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Is that there is nothing that will happen. That tragedy remains.
Well,
always.
I'm agnostic to what will happen. What I do know is that I don't believe that anyone will be punished for eternity or. That justice system, like that, if there is a God, I just think he's so much better than the idea of what he is in Abrahamic religions. Or, I mean, I know more about Abrahamic than anything else. So, but it just there's so many petty things as well that you will basically go to hell for. I mean, do you believe that only Muslims are going to be in heaven? If you're Muslim, you'll go to heaven. If you're not, you'll go to hell.
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
So like a girl in like a village in India that's Hindu, which is shirk, which is worse than murder and rape, is going to burn for eternity because that's all she knew and that's what she was brought up doing and that's what she truly believed.
So you're telling me she's ignorant, first off. You're telling me she doesn't have any knowledge.
Okay, she knows it. No, I see Muslims love to do that as well. So she knows about it. It's like, oh, she didn't know it's not her fault.
I don't have to do anything. I'm just telling you what.
No, I've heard that before. Okay, so she knows about Islam. Let's say her next door neighbor's a Muslim. Then she's supposed to be punished for eternity.
Okay, so she learns about Islam and she rejects it.
Well, I mean, I don't see it as a rejection, but she fully believes in Hinduism and that fulfills her.
Okay, well that's her business. And then when she gets to Judgment Day, she meets Allah, and Allah will basically ask her, what she did, why she believed that, and if she doesn't submit, then of course.
Yeah. I just don't see how that makes, like, in your mind, do you ever think about like people like just burning in hellfire? Like it's just, and like the description of it in the Quran is so intense. Like your skin will come off and then your skin will come back just to be burned again. And it's not even for like, it's eternity.
Yeah,
like
for eternity.
Allah is supposed to love you like 1,000,000 times more than your mother. Okay, and I can't see any mother doing that to her child. That just doesn't make sense to me. Like I don't think that anyone could be that vicious and to be like, I need you to worship me. It's a very human kind of way of just kind of worship me, tell me I'm amazing, tell me how great I am, keep saying it, say it 5 times a day.
Not worship. Well, Allah says in the Quran himself he doesn't need anybody's worship. And
yet that's the way to go to heaven.
Well, yeah, because it's for us. It's based on that's what a purpose for our existence is, to reach a certain point.
Okay.
So for example, let me just respond quickly here.
Okay.
Regarding the whole hell thing. Hell is not eternal because it's just eternal per se. I mean, Quranic scripture is also very direct, very specific about this. That I gotta find the exact passage. I'm not a hafiz, excuse me. So I will just paraphrase it for you, and then after that you can debate if you want.
Okay, go ahead.
So basically it states that the people in the hellfire will ask God to go back for a day, just so they can get enough, good deeds so they can get into heaven. Okay? And so they're asking God if they can go back. And then he responds to them and says, I know that when you go back that you're not going to do that. Okay? And that you're not going to be what, sorry?
That you're going to be good or whatever, follow Islam.
Oh, okay.
I know you're just saying that because you want to get out. I know when you go back, and he actually says that he calls them liars. And he says that you're just going to come back and do the same thing. So I'm keeping you here for that reason, because I know you're not going to do it. And so the whole thing about, they're going there because they did one thing. It's like, no, well, they're going there because they continuously refuse. They're in there because they don't stop.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. So it's not like it's because of one thing they've done and then eternally they're punished. It's because they can keep doing it.
They can do it in heaven.
Do what in heaven?
I don't understand. What they keep sinning after they've died.
No, they keep refusing to submit.
So they go to from what I've learnt, I went to a Muslim school my whole life as well. What I've learnt is that there are some people who aren't that bad who will spend a little bit of time. So there's kind of different stages. So you'll have like a year or 2 years or 10 years or 20 years or eternity as like the like final, like those are the evil people.
Those are the really bad people who don't submit. They're completely consumed by their arrogance. And there are individuals who will be punished for a certain amount of time until they submit.
Right. So, but they were created by God. Ultimately, we are the people we are because of our genetics, because of our environment. You know, you can have totally different people that, you know, if I had twins and I put them in a different environment, they could turn out totally different. It's like, that doesn't make sense to me either for that to be judged.
Oh, well, now we're dealing with like determinism and stuff like this. Okay.
Yeah,
well,
there's too many things here.
I understand that I understand the position you're coming from. Let me just put it down. Okay, so I know what you're saying. All right. You know, and then there's differences of determinants of compatibilists and things like this. Okay, so I don't know which determinist you are, and I don't want to really get into that discussion per se, but I will say that I agree with you that to some extent, where we are born and our genetics and things do play a role in how we are as people. And I will tell you personally, and I believe this truly, not just because it's my own opinion, but I believe that Allah is merciful enough that He will take those things into account.
Well, that's what I used to believe. To be honest with you, when I was a Muslim, I was very devout, and I used to just think, well, God is merciful, and He knows better, and I'll leave it to Him, and all these things that generally Muslims say. And it's funny because I bring these questions up to Muslims all the time, and they always have that answer of ultimately. It's like, I don't really know how to answer it. It's a big question. I'm not really going to go there.
Well, I'm not saying I don't know how to answer it. And I definitely won't tell you that I have the entire, like I have some comprehensive argument to give you. I'm not going to go out of my way. But I will tell you that I feel that there is a lot of coherency behind the answer. And I think that it's often, I have actually a lecture now on my channel where I kind of deal with the problem either from a pragmatic and psychological perspective. And recently, the Yaqeen Institute just released a full document from another one of our scholars that you can read if you want to engage with it in a more detailed fashion.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was written by I forget his name. Sheikh El Shanawi. Anyway, so that's currently gone up, and it's went up today, so you guys can read it if you want. Anyway, so I deal with it, but you know, my response to a lot of what you said in terms of like how evil is experienced and stuff like this is that I think the world that you are depicting from the Islamic perspective is a lot better than the one that is being depicted from one without God. And I think that you have a lot more to answer in terms of like your own worldview, in terms of how to deal with evil and define evil and even deal with it from an atheistic perspective than you do. And I'm just being frank.
It makes you feel better. That's ultimately what it is. It makes you feel better about the world.
That's a very crude way of putting it, because I could say the same thing about morality and human rights. So let's be frank. Let's not try to simplify it to that extent, because there's a lot of things that we construct in order to quote unquote feel good about the world that we live in. But I would never define it that way, because I think that's not right.
Okay, so, I didn't understand that last point about human rights, though, with regards to...
you know, like as I mentioned to Veedu, like for example, like human rights don't exist. So why do we have them? For some practical reason, right? But I'm not going to sit here and bash it because of that practical reason. You know what I mean? Like that would be what I consider to be unfair to the actual arguments behind the pragmatic reasons as to the existence of those things. You know
okay. So you're saying it's the same thing, religion is just the way it is?
I'm saying from a naturalistic perspective, that's what it all amounts to. Every human construct, even the whole society you live in, is all a myth. Everything you follow is a myth. Your moral standards, your social constructs, everything is mythological under a naturalistic perspective. There is no scientific backing to it whatsoever.
What do you think about that?
I think I already touched on this earlier, that we can derive some morals from science. So, for example, we can scientifically and empirically prove hitting someone is wrong, killing someone, rape, all these things are wrong. So I don't think it's mythological.
No, that's wrong. The thing is, we can say, for example, that hitting someone causes a certain damage to the individual.
Yeah.
To say that the damage is wrong or right is not determined by science.
But it's undesirable to the health of that person.
Who cares?
Come on.
So you're saying that without religion we wouldn't have, so religion is why we have a moral compass? Is that what you believe?
The religion is how we justify it.
How we
justify? Oh, I see what you're saying.
Justify like human rights.
Okay, but I mean,
exactly. Because without it, it all becomes arbitrary nonsense. I mean, like I mean, why should the psychopath care about the damage that's being done to his victims?
No, I think as humans, we have, even animals have instincts about, you know, things that are good and things that are bad. There is a natural.
I mean, you were saying that earlier, that there is something like, if you were to see, I don't know, someone suffering or like a child suffering, you would feel something.
That is the initial jumping point. But we come up with post hoc rationalizations for why those natural inclinations exist.
Well, I mean,
we don't rely on them. You know what I mean? We don't go, oh, I feel this way, therefore it's okay.
But, okay, so that's an interesting point. So it's a post hoc thing. But the one thing consistent amongst all, I mean, normal human beings is, for example, if a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, atheist, whatever you want to call it, all saw a child suffering, they would all feel maybe some pain or some hurt seeing a child suffering.
Yes.
Now, they may use their own religious or non-religious justifications to come to that conclusion. Nevertheless, the one thing that is consistent amongst all of them is that they are human. Whereas they can maybe use they could read Harry Potter and say, oh, Harry Potter would never do that. They could read the Quran and say Muhammad would never do that. But that's their own personal justifications. But the one thing consistent is the fact that they are human. So I would rather side with the stuff that is more consistent rather than that is personal or
I agree.
sort of subjective.
We should be as consistent and as coherent as possible in our worldviews. And what I'm trying to say is that if you adopt a worldview that completely makes everything arbitrary, or makes it only based on your inclinations, then I think that's a huge problem. I think it's a massive problem. Because now you're also justifying my belief in God.
Sorry, I'm not sorry?
Justifying.
Because you're also in many ways justifying my belief in God simply.
How so? I'm saying that's arbitrary and.
Like you said, everyone is saying, oh, you know, everyone can agree upon the fact that they see a child being hurt or something, that they'll feel that way. I can say the majority of the world agrees upon that there's a supernatural existence.
But I mean, that number has been fluctuating, and which God and how
it's
to.
Quite consistent though, in terms of supernaturalism. It's been very consistent.
There's so much that people believe, that have believed, the majority have believed in the past as well. Like that, I mean, again, when you say God, I mean, even that definition is not a consistent definition, and it's not a consistent understanding of what God is and how he or she should be worshipped. Well, exactly. The Abrahamic religions are only really not that far away from each other when all these kind of prophets, you know, they're also in the sort of similar region as well, where all these prophets kind of arose from and had very similar ideas, you know, kind of all these kind of prophecies and everything that happened. It's within, I mean, I can't remember how many years now, but I had it written down somewhere. It's not a huge kind of distance between that time. And what you know, if it is, there's so many things we could go into that. It'll take literally hours and hours.
What I was trying to say is that if you, like I said, I'll go back to the discussion. If you're going to justify particular moral moral structures, moral theories, or particular ethical decisions on the basis of the consensus or natural consensus of mankind, then you likewise have to give the same credence to religious thought in general, not simply the sort of naturalistic explanations that you've been giving, you know, forever.
So you're saying, I don't fully understand, but is this what you're saying, that because we're saying the majority of people have human instincts and would naturally want to do the right thing, you're saying, well, majority of people believe in God, therefore it should be true?
The people, naturally, the majority of people, it's a normative thing psychologically. People believe in the supernatural.
I don't know about that. Without being taught.
That's been actually
without being taught.
But hang on. So just to on that point, at one point, actually even now, at one point in time, the vast majority of human beings believe Jesus is Son of God.
And believed in multiple gods.
But hang on. But just on the point of the Son of God, because I believe the world is mostly Christian, or if you go back 100 years, when it was mostly Christian, the vast majority of human beings thought it was natural or logical to believe that Jesus was Son of God, but that's something that you would disagree with.
I wouldn't say they naturally believed it. I believe they naturally believed it.
I mean, that's how they define
God. I believe that this particular individual was God.
Yeah, so, I mean, naturally, that is the more...
You have to understand that their belief in Jesus was contingent upon natural inclination towards God.
Okay, that's fine. But I'm trying to say is you say believing God is natural, or the vast majority of human beings believe it's natural. Okay, but when you get down to the nitty gritty, when you actually get down to the details, oh, okay, we believe in a God that is Son of God, Trinity, whatever.
Okay.
But then you would say, hang on a second, that's the wrong God. That's not the right God I was talking about. And then you get into the endless theological debates, which actually don't solve anything.
Because I can do the same thing to you. I can say there
But
are
Yes, but the difference is my claim is not supernatural.
No, that's fine. But you're saying,
That's the
well,
difference.
see, okay, so let's agree that it's all natural, but then you have all these details. I can do the same thing for you. There are so many different moral theories and political theories out there. So I could say that now yours is nonsense.
You can.
Well, I'm not going to do that.
No, but what I'm trying to say is, so just to give my perspective on this, I do not have the same level of sort of certainty in that my moral is 100% God sealed, approved, right, whatever it is. And I'm not making a supernatural claim. I'm doing my best to be as cautious as possible when we're making a claim, to refer to evidence, science, reason, as opposed to saying this book said X, therefore it's true. That it's a very different methodology when you get down to it. One is very much more cautious and skeptical, whereas the other one is saying God said X, therefore it's true. And I think that is a massive leap in thinking or logic, which requires much more evidence and reason, which I don't think a lot of religions have provided, because they just say, well, God said it, and you said it's for, I'm not trying to attack you, but you said God can do anything, so he can do it. God wants this, so
because he said so. And a lot of my family would say things like that to me when they were kind of trying to bring me back. It's because God said so.
Yeah, I mean, you're someone who, you know, is very rigorous when it comes to sort of thinking and intellectual thought. So I would have thought just saying God said so, I mean, that's not much of an answer. It's like, for example, you know, Allah knows best. Okay, he does,
Okay.
but it doesn't solve anything. It doesn't.
I think it's a very crude representation of what I said.
That was a crude representation, I understand. But the point I'm trying to say is,
no, I said very clearly that if God is capable, if you believe that God is capable of doing certain things, then a particular claim within that religious tradition should not be, you know, surprising to you.
right?
You know what I mean, like that's a very different thing than say, well, God just said it, so accept it. You know, that's not really the same thing. And likewise, I just want to point out something here, that I think that you claiming that our standards are different, maybe they are in terms of how we express them, but I don't think that you follow the very standard that you're trying to apply to my religious beliefs in terms of your moral and other prescriptions that you have with regard to the world, like the way that you see the world, that you perceive it in terms of morality, in terms of values, your ideas about free speech and things like that. None of this operates by any sort of scientific standard. None of it.
I don't understand. So
Like, it just doesn't. Like,
But what does that matter, though? We've
evolved.
It doesn't matter if you're trying to be consistent with what you're asking for.
No, but I'm saying, if me believing in free speech, how is that not scientific or science? I don't understand.
Why do you believe in it?
Well, okay, so
Makes you
if there,
happy?
no, in fact, it doesn't, because some people may say some really nasty things against me. But if I believe in free speech, I have to accept what they have to say.
Well, why do you believe it then?
Okay, so I believe it because if we are ever going to get close to the truth, whatever that is, the only way we can get there is to have the most open level of inquiry into all sorts of domains of all sorts of fields of knowledge as possible. That means we have to be able to ask any question. We have to be able to say anything, and that means most of the time we might get things wrong. In fact, most time of human history, and even now, we still get things wrong. But hopefully, the more open that discussion is, the closer we will get to whatever the truth is, whatever it is, whatever it looks like. We are getting inching closer and closer to the truth. The moment you say, you can't ask this question, you can't say X, you can't question the authority of this person or this state or this king, then you are sort of closing that door to that possible truth or getting closer to that truth. So it actually has a very logical or reasoned foundation.
Seems very pragmatic. Seems very practical.
It's pragmatic, and it's the only way we can get to the truth, whatever that is.
Move forward and evolve as people.
Here's the thing, though. Say that I don't actually agree with that entirely. I'll express why in a minute. But first off, nothing you said had any sort of scientific verification. So that's my one problem. And then the second problem that I have is that I don't think that's entirely true. So let me give you a counterexample. Just entertain the thought for a moment.
Sure.
Okay, imagine that all the people who deny evolution in the United States get power and then decide, you know what, we want to teach our kids that evolution isn't true. Okay? And we want to have debates with people who believe in evolution, right? But it's sort of this unfair platform. So they can talk all they want, right? But we want to be able to spread all our nonsense everywhere. until everyone's affected. Now, and imagine the majority of the society then becomes convinced by those arguments that that evolution's not true, or that flat Earth is right. Okay, because you see a lot of that online, by the way. A lot of people are starting to buy into all these conspiracy theories because of all this openness of information and quote unquote free speech. We're not demarcating between what is fact and what is not, right? So imagine that the people who are wrong about a lot of these scientific issues, because through their free speech, end up convincing the rest of society. So what are you going to say then? I mean, because by the way, in the United States, you're not allowed to teach creationism in schools.
Yeah. So
is that opposed to free speech?
So you're saying if they want to do that, that's fine. If I'm in the United States and everyone is saying evolution is wrong, my position is I should be allowed to object to that. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, but what if they right now in the U.S. they're saying that you're not allowed to teach creation. It's not a real science. It's not fact. It's false.
Yep.
Okay, so is that opposed to free speech?
Are you asking me if I would allow?
Is it opposed to free speech that the United States is banning the teaching of creationism in schools?
What, completely?
Why?
No. I'm asking you. Have they said that you can't teach creationism?
You're not allowed to. Like it's actually been banned in a lot of places. You're
okay. That's fine. I've got no problem with saying that's wrong. I mean that's
okay, because for me, here's the thing that I have a problem with. Like, say academic institutions had this sort of understanding that you're saying about how free speech leads to all of these things, and then we just let random people come into the school and teach whatever the hell they want.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
I think that's a huge issue.
Like, okay, so there's a difference between. Okay, so for example, you're Muslim, you're part of the Yaqeen Institute. Mm-hmm. If I were to come into your office and say, I think you should teach the Earth is flat, or for example, it's okay to have gay sex. Now you could say, no, that's not what I believe. And that's your personal and private institution, which you can say, I stand for X, Y, and Z. I want to promote these values. I can say you're wrong, but I can't force you to say you have to teach this. If it's a private institution, they can do what they can preach. Evolution is not true or whatever. I don't really care. But the point is that there should always be people allowed to say the opposite and not be punished for it. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so sorry, I just want to make sure that only in the private institution is allowed to have it. So in the public institution where we're trying to teach kids, for example, what the facts are, you're saying that it's disallowed, for example, for somebody random to just come in and say, hey, professor guy, you're wrong. We should also have the same amount of time to teach our understanding of science to these kids.
But then that's like another thing. I think that's because it will get to and which religion are they going to go with? Are they going to?
I'm not really sure what the question is. I'm not trying to dodge it. I really don't understand.
Let me clarify. Okay, what I'm trying to say is that you're saying that we need free speech, practically speaking, in order so that we can discuss open ideas with each other and come to the truth.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, but what if you've already determined what the truth is and you don't want some stupid conspiracy theorists taking the floor?
Oh, great. That's great. The best way to derail or to disprove them is to actually speak to them and show them the facts.
Oh, is that the case? Because I think you're putting a lot too much confidence in the majority of the population here. I mean, there are people who are easily convinced about flat Earth. Even if you show them evidence, like they do not care.
No, I understand what you're saying. Okay, now I've got a bit of understanding. So I'm not saying free speech is perfect. I'm saying it's from what human beings have tried, it's the best way, it's the best mechanism to ensure that that you can challenge the authority, scientific authority, religious authority, political authority, whatever authority. It's the best way to challenge. It's that safety mechanism, that safety valve. I'm not saying, there's many times like we could be believing something today that is quote unquote scientific truth, but actually maybe it's not. But the best and only way to challenge that is to have free speech. If you don't have that mechanism, you'll never get there. So I'm saying, I'm not saying it's perfect and that the moment we say free speech exists, everyone's going to believe in the truth, whatever the truth is. I'm saying it's the best and only mechanism to ensure that we can reach there eventually.
Oh, it's not. There are other ways of doing it. You just don't agree.
Okay,
there are better ways to reach consensus.
How?
Kill the people you don't like.
Sorry?
Deal with people you don't like.
Kill the people you don't like.
Kill the people.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yes, that is one way of doing it, but that's not a very...
So why wouldn't you do it? I'm not entertaining that idea.
I know, but it's not a very sustainable way. I mean, one day you're killing them, tomorrow you.
Well, why not? Apparently, according to some of the people in your chat, Islamic civilization lasted 1400 years doing just that.
That's a good point, actually, that they went around killing people.
So I'm not saying I actually believe that that's the history. But what I'm saying is that I'm trying to use the arguments here. What we're proposing. We're looking for a moral standard. Okay, this is why we're discussing this, right? I'm trying to verify your moral standard. Now, you came at me first by suggesting that free speech is probably the best practical means to reaching the truth. And in many ways, I actually agree with that from a different perspective from the scientific one that you have advanced. However, there are other people who can come along and say, for practical reasons, that it's better to just slaughter everyone I don't like. And,
is that your alternative to free speech?
No, that's not my alternative.
So what is your alternative?
I don't know. What do you mean alternative?
Because you're obviously not keen on free speech, clearly.
Well, I didn't say that.
So do you believe in it then?
I believe in it. Yeah, I believe free speech is a good thing.
So what is it you disagreed?
Yeah, because I feel like maybe you're agreeing with me.
I'm disagreeing with your standards of validating or rationalizing a particular.
So so you tell me, how would you validate it?
Yeah.
We would be having a rational discussion. I think that the way that we're discussing right now, without having to refer to any sort of science, is a good way of doing it. That's why we're having this discussion right now. We're not referring
without any evidence is a good way of doing it.
What do you mean by evidence?
Well, you said science.
Evidence is not simply based on.
No, I'm just trying to understand what do you mean by science?
Okay, so for example, for people who are not aware of my field, I'm sure Veedu you are. Is like I studied philosophy for 6 years. Okay, so for us, it's like not everything that we talked about and how we verified things were based on science. Like there was no way to do that. You can't. Like the majority of things that humans believe that the way that we function in society is not based on that standard. That's what I'm trying to get across. Like a lot of things that you object to, even in respect to Islam in a moral sense, has no real scientific standing. And that's fine. It's okay. Like, do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, it's fine.
I'm still a bit confused, though. I don't know what that takes away from free speech. I mean, you can say whatever you want, but you don't want other people to use science.
No, I mean, the reason the discussion started with how do we validate our particular viewpoints? And then free speech was brought up as an example.
Okay.
That was the reason. I'm not talking about whether I like free speech or not. I'm challenging your perspective on why you're validating free speech on the basis of the standard that you have promoted. That we need some sort of scientific standard in order to believe rationally in certain things. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think that's true.
Do you understand?
I think we can come to beliefs without having to rely on science all the time. I think sometimes we come to beliefs based on the coherency of that particular viewpoint, its practicality in many respects as well, and just other things. We don't have to look at science all the time to come to these conclusions. It doesn't make any sense.
I'm okay with that, by the way. I'm personally okay with that, and I think we probably have different viewpoints on that. I think that's okay.
Okay, that's good.
It's not so much that. I don't think that's what we're arguing against, though. I think that's kind of
something else
off topic. Yeah, that's like something totally different from my perspective. Because it's so hard to get it into words. But what we're talking about is free speech and why it's good. And what you're talking about is what you should back up to do for your free speech.
That's where I've been coming from.
What you need to back it up with. But I don't really care what you back it up with. If free speech, ultimately, if you're putting a viewpoint across, and this is my viewpoint, this is why I believe it, then whatever. Like you can be like, I believe in the boogie monster because of whatever. Like that doesn't bother me. It's just about ultimately not stopping other people from believing whatever they want to believe. And I don't know, I didn't hear all of your discussion about free speech earlier, but ultimately Muslims don't generally, the ones I know anyway, don't like the kind of aspect of discussing Islam in detail. I mean, you're very good for kind of having this discussion with us, but a lot of Muslims don't want to ultimately because they don't want
that's a problem.
Any criticism or
I think it's a problem because the thing is that you see, from my understanding of the Islamic tradition as well, and you can disagree with me if you wish, but in our past, when it was so-called more barbaric, more Muslim scholars were more open to having these sort of discussions than people are today. I'm not even joking. Like they had open debates. They wrote treatises against each other. You know what I mean? Like nowadays, you can't even like, you're wrong, and then people get really angry. It's just like, even like little issues about like sex, for example. Like, you know, such a big taboo thing in like Desi Arab culture.
Yeah.
It's like scholars wrote volumes about how to have sex. I'm not even joking.
No, it's true.
It's like nowadays it's like you can't even talk about it without the auntie next door be like, shut up.
There's actually a lot about sex in Islam, a lot. And one of the things that I personally really, you know, when I was kind of having doubts, one of the things that kept coming back and I kept trying to find answers for were the sex slaves. That was just something I couldn't, like, it just didn't fly.
From sex to sex slaves. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. That's what we do on this channel.
All right.
No, but I don't understand that. Like, there were so many. I mean, it'll take you literally days for us to go into like so many reasons why I left Islam. But one of them was that I was like, how is this okay? It's in the Quran as well, because I went through a phase where I was like, oh, it's hadith. Maybe hadiths are not that legit. I'll go with the Quran. But this is like in the Quran. So I was like, I couldn't even run away from it. But like what the right hand possesses, like these women, you could just sleep with them. What do you think about that? I'd be really interested to know.
You want to ask? Okay. Well, I will tell you that. All right. You should read an article.
No, don't throw documents on me. I mean, look, this is what you believe. So ultimately, go on.
Like, this is going to be a larger discussion too now, and I'm just being frank with you. Like, it's already been 2 hours.
Okay.
So
we normally go for a good. Well, he normally goes 3 hours.
If you really want to know my beliefs on the subject, okay. If you really want to know what I think about it, right? There is an actual article where you can see my views on the subject matter.
Oh, so this is something you've spoken about?
No, I haven't spoken about personally yet, though I assisted one of the other professors and scholars in this respect for writing this article and things. Okay, anyway, so like I said, on our website, Yaqeen Institute, we have an article on the subject matter.
Okay.
If you want to know my views, you can go there. You don't have to.
Can I just ask you one more question?
Yeah,
that's completely different, though.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to. Sorry,
You're a very popular man.
I just remembered something that I thought about. There were so many questions I had when I was watching you earlier. And one of them was when you were talking about the 9-year-old. So Waleed has always, when we were both Muslims, he always was like, she wasn't 9 years old. And I do think she was 9 years old. There's talk about her, and you were like, oh, well, they developed. And I like that idea. That's a nice way, because it's horrible to think that she was 9 and she was a child.
You're completely okay to feel repulsed by that within the contemporary period. That's fine.
But no, but she had dolls, and she was playing with dolls. Do you not know about the narrative of how she had brought dolls to the Prophet's house, and then also she would play with them, and he'd let her play with them, and then he wouldn't force anything upon her, and then he didn't actually have sex with her until he would masturbate on her, and that description is very clear of how he would masturbate between her thighs.
So
rather than because she was so young.
Okay, sorry. As for the thigh thing, that's invalid. But I will back your opinion about.
If it said she was older, I feel like Muslims would be like, that one's valid.
Sorry, Waleed. My apologies, Waleed. Your opinion that she was older is actually not appropriate in terms of like the hadith evidence and stuff. There's no validity behind your position. I'm sorry. But
I am in most cases wrong anyway, so I'm completely okay with being wrong.
There's no validity behind it whatsoever in terms of scholarly tradition. Like, that's fine. That opinion just came about like
Muslims just like to believe that if they feel
the past 100 years, that was the only reason it ever came up.
Okay, fair enough.
To that, Muslims and scholars all thought she was 9, and they all used evidence. So she is correct in this respect. And however, in terms of
she's correct. It's kind of say she's correct in most respects anyway. So I'll just have to take it on the chin.
In terms of the thigh thing, though, that there's no hadith validity behind that at all. That was that's also a later view. And I'm just trying to be fair here, and I understand. The doll hadith is also true. That is also true. And okay, before we go on even further,
sorry, go on.
So there's I actually am personally authoring an article about this where I explain my argument in 27 pages. So you can please read that as well when it comes out.
I will, and then we should have part 2 after I've read the 2 things.
But I want to tell you before we conclude any of this, because I don't even want to look at the comments anymore. Too many idiots.
Hey, that's all fan-based.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not blaming you necessarily. I'm just saying that you do have a lot of troglodytes in the chat room. So I have enjoyed talking to you guys, and I thank you so much for being cordial.
No, listen. Asadullah, man. Honestly, I want to give a massive shout out to yourself. You absolute star coming on. it's been 3. How many hours has it been?
Almost 3, isn't it?
I think it's 3 now.
That's amazing. So we've gone for an absolute marathon on this. So I genuinely want to thank you, and we've had such an open discussion. I haven't felt like I've had to censor myself or whatever it is or whatever. And I hope there's no. If I say something wrong or insulting, please.
Fine. I know. I hope that we discuss. And be frank with you guys, I want to discuss these things more in the future. But I feel like that we should dedicate like a video per topic.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because that would make it a lot better for us. Because I'm gonna be frank with you. I do not like sort of the McDonald's buffet type knowledge, and people just sort of throwing memes out there. If you really want to comprehend a subject and you want to oppose it or support it, you should steel man it as much as possible in the most comprehensive way. Because I don't like these crude caricatures of either of our beliefs. I agree. Who also crudely, depict you guys or your beliefs in a specific manner. I'm sure you don't appreciate it either. Likewise, I don't like that.
Yeah. So I think what you said is spot on. If I have misrepresented your views, I certainly wasn't intentional from my point of view, and I apologize if I have. I want to give a massive shout out to yourself. I would love to do a part 2. I've really enjoyed this.
What we should do then is maybe we obviously talk behind the scenes, set topics, and then you can bring your prepared documents. You refer to them a lot, so maybe have them.
We could actually
love to, because
when you release one of them, you could actually focus it on that article if you want.
Yeah, and then discuss it. There are things that I really want to talk about, like in terms of like terrorism and stuff too. There's a lot of myths that are out there, regarding like why Muslims behave the way they do and things. And I think it's appropriate to get that away if we really want to have discussions too. And I appreciate that you guys actually want me to do this, because I've told you like 100 times before hundreds of times before when I've tried to interact with people, or even a lot of other ex-Muslims, like they won't even let me like cite the academic evidence.
Sure.
Like,
we want evidence for sure.
We're talking about science and evidence.
We're waiting. We've been waiting for evidence.
Maybe we can also talk about the standards of epistemology, because I don't know. I know we had very brief discussion on that, but I have a very holistic way of looking at things, in my opinion. Like I don't just say we need science for this all the time. And sometimes over here, I do believe that pragmatic arguments work very well, and I think that there are other ways of verifying our beliefs. And I think if we come to that conclusion, then it'd be much more productive conversation as well. Which was what I was trying to interact with you guys. I was trying to get you guys to like, produce your justifications beyond that, because I wanted to prove a point, and it wasn't trying to like own you or anything. I just wanted you guys to
no. What I think we have to do is obviously not take it personally. I think we're both sides. I think we've basically done that. I mean, I know I can be quite harsh when I speak as well. It's because of I work in sales, so sometimes I know I can be quite hard when I speak to people. But yeah, it's like I'm just kind of doing it.
I didn't take it wrong at all. I mean, you should see the people I deal with on a daily basis. Like that's nothing. It's like there are people in the comment section right now calling me all sorts of horrible things. Like these.
But we get it too. I mean,
don't worry. Like I'm used to it so much. I just don't care.
So. Absolutely. So listen, just to finish off, because I know we've taken so much of your time, and I really appreciate it. I want to give a massive shout out to Asadullah, man. Check out his channel, check out his story. Really good story. I really enjoyed it. Massive thank you for coming on the show. Real pleasure. I've just got one last question. Which might it's not like a theological question. It's just more of a sort of quick question. This might annoy you, but I've been told to ask this, so apologies beforehand. Someone has said Asadullah gets his cronies from time to time and challenge me for a chat, but every time I agree, I never hear back. Are you ready for a chat with me, or are you still nervous? That's from Hari Sultan.
Oh, what's that about?
Hari Sultan, let me be frank with you, just like I'm frank with your friends. Okay, get the proper education first before you come after me. Okay?
Wow.
Oh my god, this is the first time we've had like beef on our channel.
No, I'm serious. Get the proper education before you come after me, and don't try to talk down to me again, because you are a peasant. Done.
Wow, that's.
I think we're not going to comment. We need.
And if you get to talk to me, that's your privilege. Okay. End of discussion. You guys are my friends as far as I'm concerned, so I will speak with you. But this guy's a midget.
Well, Hari Sultan, you heard it there. Well, there's not much more I can say on that issue. So Any last words?
No, I just want to thank you again, and I appreciate it. And like I said, I respect you guys for respecting me, and I respect you guys for being open and having an honest and sincere discussion. And I apologize for being a little rude at times with some of the others, but you have to understand that I have to demarcate.
No worries. Thank you so much. You've been so great, and
I loved it. I
look forward to speaking to you again at some point.
And keep doing the satire. Keep doing it. I think it's great.
I will do my best, but it's probably not going to be at your level.
Okay. All right, man. All right. Listen, thank you so much, guys. In the comment section, thank you so much. I'm sorry I couldn't get through all the questions. There's too many questions, too little time. But I want to thank you guys, and we will hopefully do this again. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you guys have as well. Thank you for my wife for coming in and showing me how it's done. I'm still learning. Thank you very much. Haris said he's a peasant. Yes, you are a peasant. You're a midget as well.
I'm a peasant.
So, guys, stay safe, be happy, and we will see you next time. I hope that answers the question.
There you go.
There you go. Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Bye.
That's, I guess, long.